Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's hearing. We're going to resume the evidence of Mr. Williams.
Mr. Williams, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning.
Sit down, make yourself comfortable. Thank you for coming in earlier than usual. I think we're ready to continue if you are.
Morning, Mr. Williams. Morning. Can I start by revisiting something that we discussed yesterday?
Certainly.
Which is the bringing down, your recollection of the bringing down of a forward information board from the Bridgehead at the start of your exercise of putting up FSG on the wall at 2:15.
Certainly.
Now, can I start by showing you some pictures from the CCTV footage? And can I ask the first one to be put up on the screen, which is INQ 261. Now, this is timed at an adjusted time of 02:15:12. So, and this is clearly you in the lobby of Grenfell Tower at that time.
It is, yeah.
Can you identify, first of all, yourself?
Yep.
And
I'm the firefighter in the middle of the picture.
And secondly, can you identify what is in your left hand?
Looks like there's a piece of paper.
Yes. If we can just focus on that. Do you remember what piece of paper you brought down or you had in your hand at that stage?
I do not remember what that piece of paper was.
Right. Is it possible that you were given a piece of paper when coming down from the second floor, having looked at the bridgehead?
It's possible, yeah.
Right. Now, you can see at that stage that that you didn't bring down. Well, can you see yourself bringing down anything else?
No.
No. If you then go to the next picture, which is 244. I think we looked at this yesterday.
Yeah.
I think you identified you as writing on the wall.
Yeah.
At that stage, and the time then is 02:16:29.
Yeah.
Adjusted, it gives 02:15:53. So that would be more or less about the time when you marked 02:15 FSG on the wall.
Absolutely.
We then go forward a minute or two, and again we looked at these yesterday. INQ 245. We looked at that. Again, I think it's obvious, I can put it to you, there's no forward information board that we can see in that picture.
Agree.
And then, take this from me, we've reviewed the CCTV footage from 02:17 through to the time when the bridgehead moved down to the ground floor, and we see no forward information board or anything like a forward information board next to you by that wall at that stage.
Okay.
Okay, we then move on. We go to 3:17:05, which is picture 253, and adjusted that gives 03:16:29 in the morning. And we looked at this yesterday as well, and there's you pointing at the wall. Now, I don't know whether you can see there a forward information board anywhere in the picture, either next to you or on the left leaning against the wall.
If the forward information board, my recollection of it was just below the sign where it says Grenfell Community Room. It's feasible that my recollection of that detail is cloudy. It was a very busy night.
Yeah.
The evidence is quite clear that the forward information board's not there.
Right.
So I do take it from you. It wasn't brought down at the time in which I thought it was.
No. Okay. Well, I don't want to put a false memory in your mind. Let me just see if I can finish off the line of the pictures. If you go to the next one, which is INQ 257, which is timed at 03:07:58, adjusted. We can see no board of any kind underneath the sign. That's you, but clearly, I mean, we can see that. There are a couple of what look like boards leaning up against the window there, but those aren't forward information boards, are they?
No, I don't know what that
In fact, well, we think they're tables, actually, but do you remember tables coming down to the Bridgehead, or being at the Bridgehead?
No.
Okay. And then the next picture, which is 235, showing an adjusted time of 0309.
There it is. There it is.
Ah, where?
The firefighter without a hat on has got the forward information board under his arm.
Right. Does that help you with your recollection as to when it came down?
So what's that? 0312?
That is 030955 as adjusted.
030955. So that's the forward information board. That looks like Brian O'Keefe.
Yes.
And I'm talking to what I think that's probably Paul Watson because of the height of him.
Right. I'm sorry, I've misled you, actually. That is 031006.
Yeah. So when did the Bridgehead come down?
Yes. Well, about then, we think.
So there's the forward information board.
To be precise, there's a photograph taken of the Bridgehead on the third floor, or the pictures on a FSG on the wall on the third floor, by Station Manager Cook at 3:08.
Yeah.
And he said it was just before the Bridgehead was moved down from the third floor to the ground floor.
I would agree that that is the forward information board, and if 3:08 is the approximate time that they relocated the Bridgehead, then I think it's quite feasible that is my recollection.
Okay. Well, that's very helpful, thank you. Can I just put one more picture to you, which is INQ 259. And this is timed at 0311. It's only a minute or so later. 031150 as adjusted.
Yeah.
Does that help you?
It does, yeah.
Right. And where do we see the forward information board in that picture?
Yeah, I'm in terrible trouble with my right and left in my memory, aren't I?
You're not alone. But we can see you, and if you're facing us, is it to your left? Leaning against the wall?
It is to my left.
With the red top?
It is, yes.
Right, thank you. So looking at all of those, I think we've already agreed that, in fact, your recollection of working from a forward information board early in the evening is hazy, and it came down to you.
Can I just draw reference to the part in my statement? There's a part in my statement where I asked the crew to set up in the foyer the entry control officers, Justin O'Byrne and St Alban.
Yes.
And I instructed them to set the boards up leaning against the glass wall so that we could correlate information.
Right.
It gave us an opportunity to clearly communicate between the fire survival guidance information and the committing of breathing apparatus.
Yes. In fact,
that is the stage in my statement.
Right.
That took place.
Right. Okay, that's very helpful. Can I just pin you down to the statement? It's page 13 in the middle. Fourth paragraph down. Where you say 2 firefighters, Justin O'Byrne and Alex St Alban, I think that's Alex D. St Alban, from G27 North Kent, came down carrying 4 entry control boards. I said to them, guys, set up here pointing at the glass wall opposite. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're referring to?
That is exactly what I'm referring to.
Okay, that's very helpful. So would that mean then that before the Bridgehead came down to the ground floor at shortly after 3:08 a.m., the FSG information that you were getting was coming to you via control information forms or perhaps other pieces of paper?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah. Yes. So does that mean that prior to the Bridgehead moving down to the ground floor, very shortly after 3:08 a.m., the FSG information that you were writing on the wall in the lobby was coming to you by control information forms or perhaps other pieces of paper?
It does mean that. However, the first picture you showed me shows I am holding a piece of paper.
Yes.
And I believe I have a strong recollection of obtaining the information that existed on the forward information board at the beginning of me commencing FSG, so that there would be so we would have a clear and concise understanding of the FSG we were dealing with. So if that is by means of a piece of paper, but my memory suggest something other. I struggle to remember, but what I am certain on is I'm certain that I collated that information first.
Right.
Is that clear?
Yes, that is clear.
Thank you.
That leads to a question. Let me just try and follow it up. If you could just then go back to the white version of the wall, which is MET 00057774, you see that the first flat number that you write on the middle list, which you told us yesterday was your first list,
It was, yeah.
appears to be 205, followed by 95, and then 74.
Yeah.
And you told us that you wrote them in downwards order.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a recollection of whether 205 was actually the first flat you wrote up there, or did that come later, slightly later than the very first inscription?
I believe that they were the first. My recollection is that I started at the top.
Right.
But I don't know if I had received some slips or some numbers prior to collating the information off the off the forward information board.
Yeah.
So it's feasible that I might have received some numbers and I've written them up, and then because I do, and then I've written up what has been written on the forward information board.
Yeah.
My memory, from memory, I thought I asked Charlie, Crew Manager Batterby, to go and get the information from the forward information board, but you would have to ask Crew Manager Batterby if he did that.
Okay. What I'm really trying to drive at is just for whether flat 205, that information came from the piece of paper you brought down from the Bridgehead, you say, or whether it came from a control information form being brought to you from outside. Maybe you can't remember, but
I seem to recall the numbers on the forward information board. I thought there was the lower numbers from memory. I thought there were lower numbers on the forward information board, and looking through this list, I can see that slightly later, like number 9's there.
Yes.
Do you see further
Yes.
down?
Yes.
And that's kind of bringing back a memory that actually I must have, maybe I received some slips first, maybe I received some numbers first, and then the information I collated from the forward information board then went on after that.
Right. Right. Okay. That's very helpful.
Sorry, I can't shed more light on that.
No, and it would be, I think, unfair of me to keep pressing you, but thank you, that's very helpful. Just one more question. I always have one more question. I put to you an envelope. I put to you a list of numbers. I called it an envelope, you called it a list. If those numbers weren't on an envelope or on a piece of A4 paper, but not on a control information form,
Yeah.
let me just posit that to you. Is that something that triggers a recollection?
What has triggered a recollection, obviously, I go away and don't sleep very much when you're attending an inquiry, is that I do recall being narrated numbers, but I couldn't tell you what the numbers were. So I do recall someone telling me a list of numbers.
Right.
But I can't give you a specific on it. So it's feasible that somebody read out and said, and who may have told me a list of numbers, and I've written them up, and then made sure that is communicated to the Bridgehead. But I can't recall a specific. I don't recall the pieces of paper you used as evidence yesterday.
No.
And I don't recall identifying the saddler stuff.
No. Okay. All right.
So it's feasible someone verbally gave me some numbers and I wrote it up.
Right.
It's all of my handwriting. So up until Pete Wolfenden arrived, it's my writing. So if the information that you have on evidence relates to the wall, then it's feasible that might have been transferred verbally as well.
Yes, I see. And do you remember whether the person who was giving you the list, or reading out a list of numbers to you, was a crew manager or?
I mean, this is a very fresh memory.
Okay. Okay. You say it's a fresh memory.
Well, it's having discussed it all yesterday, and you go away and you think about it, and so no, I can't add any great specific on it.
Okay.
It's just something that has come to me.
Yeah. Okay. It came to you overnight, did it?
Yeah.
Right. Did anything else come to you overnight?
No.
Okay.
No, that's the thing that I was racking my brain for.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful.
How I was receiving the information. I was quite surprised by the whole recollection of the forward information board, to be honest. I thought that was very clear in my mind, and it's not until you see a picture and it's not. So.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Well, that's very helpful. Thank you. Can I then turn to a different topic, which is the Bridgehead moving to the ground floor, which we've discussed a bit about. But you say in your statement on page 13, we can just look at it, in the fourth paragraph, that at approximately 3:45 a.m., the Bridgehead was moved down to the ground floor as there was a concern about the structure of the building. Now, did somebody tell you that there was a concern about the structure of the building?
I don't know. I think it's fair to say that the time that I've attached to my statement is not that accurate now. So there was a point in which we were informed by, and it may have been before this, it may have been around the same time, but there had been a concern that the structure of the building was in question. And I recall them telling all of the BA wearers in the foyer to move back, and I believe they were being moved back to the community room. And I recall it because I have a distinct memory of not having my helmet, thinking, I've given my helmet to the little girl, and now the question of the building, the structure of the building is coming to question.
Yes. Who did you hear this from, this question of the structure of the building?
It would be inaccurate for me. It would be a guess. It was somebody within. It was an officer within the foyer.
Right. And you think that was about the same time as the Bridgehead was moved down, regardless of the actual time?
I think it might have been before that.
Okay.
I'm very skewed on as we've progressed yesterday. My timings have become more skewed. Now,
going back to something you drew our attention to this morning, which is the next paragraph in your statement, where you told Justin O'Byrne and Alex Decent-Albin to set up the entry control boards at the glass wall opposite. You go on to say, by this point there were a lot of FSGs written on my wall, and I thought it would be a good place to position the Bridgehead so we could communicate directly. And you go on then to say that in the next paragraph, and I'm summarising it, that Gareth Cook and Richard Welsh and Pat Goulburn came down and instructed the Bridgehead to position by the glass wall, but on the stairway side. Does that mean that would be on the other side of the glass wall or glass
Correct.
barrier? Okay. Because you go on to say, this made no sense to me as, again, this created another barrier between the FSG and the Bridgehead. My question is, was your concern that FSG information wouldn't get through if the Bridgehead was on the other side of the glass from you?
No, my concern was that we're creating another physical obstacle for clear communication. In our line of business, communication's key. So if you do everything you can to have clear lines of communication. And we'd already been faced a lot of challenges throughout the evening with the dynamic of the incident and the speed in which it was progressing and the number of personnel that we were using, and deciphering information from those people, from casualties. It didn't make any sense to create another obstacle.
Did you express your concerns or your thoughts to any of those officers?
Yeah.
What did you say?
I said, why are you setting up underneath the staircase?
Do you remember who you said that to?
I said it. I stood in the doorway next to Gareth Cook and I called it through in a raised voice. Why are you setting up underneath the staircase?
Right. What did he say?
I didn't get an answer.
Right. Did you think he heard you?
I've got a pretty clear voice.
Right. Okay. Do you know why he decided to? Well, he didn't answer you. Do you know why he didn't answer you?
Who?
Whoever it was you spoke to.
I believe that the officers within the Bridgehead would have a reasoning for their action. You'd have to ask the Bridgehead, the officer in charge of the Bridgehead.
Right. Now, in the next paragraph, you say, Watch Manager Watson and I carried on as we did before, but with him now positioned in the foyer, he continued to transfer information from me to the Bridgehead. Just so that I've got a picture in my mind, where was he located when you carried on as before? Was he your side of the glass wall or the other side of the glass wall?
Correct, my side of the glass wall.
And what did he do? Did he go in and out of the door, coming back and forth?
From recollection, my task became busier and busier. So, with the cross-checking on the wall, so he would come essentially as a runner between me and the door.
Yes,
although it was a small distance, it just meant that I could focus all of my attention on the information against the wall.
Okay. And were you shouting to him as you had been before?
I didn't. I mean, we had clear lines of communication. He was coming directly to me,
right,
to my side. I would talk to him about the numbers that we were getting duplicates, and we were getting a lot of confusing information. As I mentioned yesterday, it was becoming more of a challenge to understand the information we were getting in.
And was he still writing the information you were giving him on pieces of paper and then giving it to crews?
He was, yes.
Okay. So where would he write? Where was he standing when he wrote?
Where was his what?
Where was he standing when he wrote down the pieces of paper?
I mean, generally here.
Right. And what would he do? Would he go through the door to the waiting crews or something different?
I don't believe he went through the door, but I assume you've spoken to Paul Watson, so he'd have a more accurate description as to what he did at that point.
Right. I'm just trying to get your recollection there.
My recollection is that he went from me at the wall to the direction of the door. I never saw him go through that door.
Right. Okay. Did you see him give the information to anybody on the other side of the door by the stair?
In the same way as I answered yesterday, he took the information, he went to the point in which the Bridgehead was situated. I didn't see a physical transaction of information.
Okay. It may help just to refer to an exhibit of yours, just so we've got a plan of the ground floor in mind, so we know exactly what we're talking about. If you could please be showing your fourth exhibit, which is MET 000013093. Now, it's a very full or information-rich diagram. You are putting up your FSG on the wall on the left of the main entrance there. And then you have second phase, you put in the middle, Watch Manager Watson, towards the top of the picture, near, but I think underneath the mezzanine. Is that where he was standing during this second phase, when the Bridgehead came down to the ground floor?
I mean, that is the area that he located himself. He was standing in various places.
Okay. And can you just point out for us where the glass, the door through the glass wall is?
Where you can see If you just move, that's it. There.
There. Okay. So, and then you put the stairs there.
Yeah. So if you, as you went through the glass door, I mean, I appreciate it might not be to scale, but as you go through the glass door, immediately to your right, there was a little walkway or not a walkway. There was a space between the stairs and the glass wall.
Yes.
Parallel to the stairs, and then you had a staircase that went up, and then it double backed on itself.
Yes.
And then it kind of dog-legged round to the left, and then that was the mezzanine. And then the door, where I've written door, the top left-hand corner, that was the door that went through to what I believe to be the original Bridgehead.
Okay. Did you see how the information about FSG was getting to BA wearers? Was being put in the hands of BA wearers?
My understanding was that Paul Watson and I continued in the same method that we had been using when he had been situated on the mezzanine level. So I would give him the number, the floor, and the number of people involved. He would write that down, and he would hand that to the Bridgehead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Now, we've had some evidence, and I'll show it to you, that FSG information had been recorded on the wall when the Bridgehead was on the 3rd floor, from about 2:20 to about 3:08 a.m. And that information was then brought down to the ground floor. Let me start by just showing you a picture. Can I ask you to be shown MET 000015625? Now, that's a photograph of the FSG that Louisa De Silva, watch manager De Silva, had recorded as she was getting it on the 3rd floor when the Bridgehead was there, as I've said.
Okay.
And that photograph was taken when the Bridgehead was moving or about to move down to the ground floor, and you can see an officer coming down from the 3rd floor there on the right of the picture. Okay. My question is, were you aware that FSG information had been recorded at the Bridgehead on the 3rd floor and then brought down to the ground floor by photograph in order to be written up?
So from the moment I transferred, myself and Paul Watson were transferring fire survival guidance information. There's a lot of numbers there on that picture that relate to the information I transferred. So, obviously, of course, you would have to have asked Louisa De Silva, but do the numbers that are written on the wall there correlate? Do they correlate with the numbers that I've written on the wall downstairs in FSG? Because if so, that would suggest to me that that's information got back from crews. The fact it says Euston, is it feasible that that's the information I had been transferring originally?
Well, let me ask you, did anybody come to you while you were writing or continuing to write, whether before or after Pete Wolfenden arrived, whether or not, and showed you a photograph on a phone of FSG information that they brought down from the 3rd floor?
I don't recall a photograph, no.
Right. Do you recall seeing any other kind of document which recorded the information captured on the wall on the 3rd floor being brought to you to inscribe on the wall on the ground floor when the Bridgehead moved down?
I don't. No, I don't.
No. Okay.
But as I've just, hopefully made clear, the numbers that are listed, the circled numbers that are on there, look familiar to the numbers that are on my wall.
Right.
The FSG wall.
Okay. Do you remember? Well, let's put them. Let's see if we can. I don't want to spend hours doing an oral audit with you, because for obvious reasons. But let's see, putting them together, whether any particular numbers on the third floor wall correlate or reconcile with anything you wrote on your wall?
Yeah.
I'm not going to go through the list one by one, but is there anything that stands out to you?
Well, 205 and 204. 205 is the first one. It's the highest point that we can assume was reached because it's got Euston attached to it. And that's the first number on the FSG wall. The fact that there was a crew at 205, you'd have to ask the crew, but I would imagine they probably went to 204 at the same time.
Well, that may be, but from your recollection and your knowledge, looking at the information that was recorded on the third floor wall, does that trigger a recollection as to anything you wrote on the wall on the ground floor?
I think you'd agree we can see the numbers that have been transferred from the FSG wall and the numbers that have been recorded on the third floor wall. I think we can agree that the circled numbers are on the FSG wall. So 205, 204, 182, 62 or 52?
Yeah.
133, 122. There's a 95 there, which is my second number. I think you'd agree that all the circled numbers are actually on the fire survival guidance wall.
Yes, and we can see that, and we can do that exercise. What I'm really asking you is whether looking at them, anything actually triggers a recollection in your mind from the night itself as to any of the information you wrote up on the wall yourself.
Well, the recollection I have is that I transferred information of numbers for their fire survival guidance, and looking at this evidence, it clearly has been recorded on the third floor.
Right, okay. Now, can I just ask you something, moving ahead to your contemporaneous note? And on page 2 of your contemporaneous note, you say, in the paragraph about halfway down, which starts, myself and the other watch manager, you say in the second sentence there, we continue to operate the system, but the foyer had become heavily congested with firefighters waiting to be committed, and the communication of FSG information was not getting used in the same way as it had been. Can I just ask you about what you mean there? When you say it wasn't getting used in the same way as it had been, what do you mean?
So I was providing the numbers to Watch Manager Watson, and he continued to write up BA as I spoke about yesterday. But then he instructed me to stop writing BA because the BA crews, the BA firefighters weren't being committed on receipt of that information.
Right.
I raised this.
What's that?
Myself and Pete Wolfenden had a discussion about this at that point.
Okay.
That was at the same time. Yesterday we referenced control information forms going directly through to the bridgehead under the mezzanine.
Yes.
It was the same.
Same thing.
It was the same. It coincides with the same time.
Okay. Well, we're going to come back to that in a moment. You go on to say that the information that we were providing the bridgehead did not appear to be acted on by the bridgehead and the borough commanders. It felt as though the communication between myself and FSG and the bridgehead was breaking down. Who are the borough commanders you're referring to there?
Group manager Richard Welch, and he also had another borough commander with him. I don't know what his task was, but that was group manager Pat Goldborn.
Right. And was this breakdown that you refer to evident to you as soon as the bridgehead moved down to the ground floor, or did it develop at a later point?
Sorry.
This breakdown in communication, did you see it as soon as the bridgehead moved down to the ground floor, or did it become evident to you at a later point?
It became evident once the crew... I suggested the crew set up, as I've mentioned, and then they were instructed by the officers at the Bridgehead to move the entry control boards through the door and under the mezzanine stairs. That's communication started to break down then.
Right. Did you raise your concerns about that breakdown in communication with anybody?
Yes.
Who's that?
I raised it with Pete Wolfenden, myself and Paul Watson had a discussion about it.
Right.
And I raised it with, very soon after I raised it with Group Manager Welch.
Right. Did you have a conversation with Watch Manager O'Keefe when the Bridgehead came down to the ground floor?
I did, but I would be unable to recall the content of the conversation.
Okay. Did he express any surprise to you that you were operating an FSG system of collation that he didn't know anything about?
No.
Okay.
Not that I recall.
He has a recollection that you indicated to him that there would be mass casualties and that, in his words, of what you said, the whole thing is gone. That's what he remembers you saying to him. Can you comment?
I don't recall saying that.
Okay.
I would have made reference to the number of casualties, and that would have been based on the information I was gathering.
Right.
But I wouldn't have. I don't recall saying the whole thing is gone.
Okay. Can I then take you to page 14 of your statement, in the second paragraph, where you say, at some point while this was going on, and that's a reference to the steady flow of casualties, and when the Bridgehead was on the ground floor, you say, I was joined by Station Manager Pete Wolfenden, who was sent in to assist. He asked me, how are you doing this, Glynn? Oh, sorry, Glynn. And I explained the system we had in place, to which he replied, well, let's stick with it, acknowledging if it's working, we'll keep using it. Again, roughly, do you know what time this was?
My recollection is it was roughly the same time. It was around about the same time as the Bridgehead being brought down to the ground floor.
Okay.
Maybe slightly before.
Slightly before, you
Your
think?
CCTV would timestamp.
Okay. Now, we know from the short incident log that Pete Wolfenden actually arrived at the scene at 02:12:58. And just for our reference, I don't want to show it to you, it's page 13 of the short incident log. And he says in his statement that when he entered the building and spoke to you and Watch Manager Watson, the Bridgehead had been moved down from the third floor because the atrium was the only area not full of smoke. Now, do you remember that? Do you remember that the reason for the move down was that that was the only area not full of smoke?
I don't know the reasoning for the moving down.
Okay.
Of course, I was in the entrance for the entirety of the incident, so I have no idea.
When Pete Wolfenden turned up and you had the discussion where he asks you, how are you doing this, Glynn? And you explain the system, did you ask him to do anything?
It doesn't generally work like that. He's a senior ranking officer. It doesn't generally work that I direct him.
No.
He's there to assist me, and part of his role would be to oversee that I'm working to as high a standard as I can. So it wouldn't be for me to tell him what to do. It'd be for him to make a decision as to the effectiveness of the work I'm doing.
Okay. And what did he do? What job did he start to do?
He asked me what I was doing, how I was doing it, how I was transferring the information, where I was getting the information from, and we had a discussion around. I used the word pattern, but it wasn't pattern. He was saying, is there any sense to it? Is there any system? And to which point I said, no, I'm just doing it as they come. And he said, okay, let's keep going.
You said, let's stick with it.
Yeah.
And what did he do?
So he did write a couple of times on the wall and transfer information, but then he went. He said, "You stay on the wall, working with Paul," and then he I believe he was liaising with the Bridgehead.
So he wasn't by the wall next to you constantly after he arrived?
No, certainly not. And I believe he had a clear line of communication with the command unit, but you would have to ask him that.
Well, I was going to ask you. Okay. He says in his statement that, and I'll just put to you what he says in his statement, and obviously we'll have to explore that with him when he comes, if he comes, and that is that he said that you told him that you had a process in place in which you would receive information via radio from the command unit, and that would then be written on a piece of paper and handed to Watch Manager Watson. So his recollection is that the information you were getting when he arrived was coming to you by radio from the command unit.
That may be his recollection, but that's not what I was doing.
Right. So is your recollection that at no stage did you get FSG information by radio?
We were receiving FSG information via radio, but that was later on in the incident, as I mentioned yesterday.
Yes, okay.
That was once Pete Wolfenden had joined me.
Yes.
It seemed that he had a clear line of communication with the command unit that was facilitating fire survival guidance.
And as you said yesterday and again this morning, it wasn't you speaking to the command unit. Whenever there was radio communication, it was Pete Wolfenden.
Yes.
That's right, is it?
Correct.
Okay. And when he got information, when he arrived and got information by radio from the command unit, how did he communicate that? How did that information get onto the wall?
He verbally told me, and I wrote it on the wall.
Right. And did he sometimes write... When he wrote on the wall, was he getting that information from the command unit or from pieces of paper?
When he first joined me, we were still receiving the information on information control forms. He was using the information from the information control form.
Right.
By the point in which I was scribing on the wall from radio communication, that was when, and Pete Wolfenden was speaking on the radio, and I was transferring that information onto the wall.
Right, okay. And at that time when he was getting information by radio and you were scribing it onto the wall, were you also getting information, continuing to get information via control information forms, or had that flow stopped?
I do recall that flow slowing. It would be inaccurate to say it stopped, but certainly wasn't as much.
Yes, I see. Do you recall speaking to a station manager Egan at that point?
I spoke to a station manager of which I don't know his name, and I may have, in my statement, I refer to Mick Mulholland, but it may not have been Mick Mulholland I spoke to. I may have mistaken him for someone else, so it's feasible I could have spoken to a station officer Egan, station manager Egan.
Now, do you remember anybody taking, or a station manager taking a photograph of your wall at this stage, once the Bridgehead had come down?
No.
No. Do you recall being asked by a station manager what your tick meant? A wall tick.
I do, yeah. I do recall being asked what the tick meant.
Do you remember the rank of the person who asked you?
No.
What did you tell them?
I think, I can't recall the exact words, but it would have been exactly as I explained to you yesterday.
Okay.
Initially, it was that I was trying to correlate the BA crew reaching that floor flat. So, and I would have told him that it's inaccurate. It didn't work.
Right. Do you have a recollection of him telling you that he was on Channel 3 and in contact with the command unit through that channel?
I don't have a recollection. He may have. If he'd come from the command unit, it's feasible he would have told me that.
Can I turn to a slightly different topic? On page 14 of your statement, you say in the fourth paragraph down that a station manager from the ORT, who I do not know, came in from the corridor and stated firefighters are not being committed past the 10th floor and that we were facing a significant loss. And you go on to say, this was difficult for me to hear, and I expressed my dissatisfaction on hearing this. I asked him, what am I meant to do? He replied, keep recording all of it. I did not question this, as I just wanted to carry on doing my job. And I know it's difficult, but have you a recollection of what time this was?
Yes, the recollection is that it was, the bridgehead was on the ground floor. The bridgehead had been moved underneath the stairs on the mezzanine. The reference to the ORT is maybe inaccurate because it was with reference to the tabards that, as I said to the detective when this was being written, we wear different coloured tabards for different roles, and I seem to recall the person I was speaking to was wearing a tabard, which is why I thought it was Mick Mulholland, but it's feasible it wasn't.
Okay, well, we may find that out from him, but what is the ORT tabard? What colour is it?
It's red.
Is it completely red, or has it got checkers?
I think it's got, I can't remember.
Okay, all right. Just to try to fix it in terms of timing, in the paragraph before, you say that approximately 15 to 20 minutes after the bridgehead was moved down, I spoke to a woman who had severe burns to both her feet. She stated she had walked down herself from the 16th floor before being taken out of the tower. And then you say shortly after, you had this discussion with the ORT. Now, if the bridgehead was moved down at about 3:10, and 15 to 20 minutes after that, you had the discussion with the woman from the 16th floor, so 3:30 or so, would that help you with the timing of your discussion with the station manager?
Unfortunately, it wouldn't, because as this process has gone on, as I said at the beginning today, the times are becoming more and more skewed. So no, it wouldn't help me.
Okay. When you were told that firefighters were not being committed past the 10th floor, did you ask the station manager why crews weren't being committed above the 10th floor?
Yes.
And what were you told?
There was some confusion as to this around this information. Myself and Pete Wolfenden had a conversation. There was some confusion, and Pete Wolfenden went to inquire as to the how accurate this information was.
Right, but did you speak to the station manager? Did you ask the station manager why crews weren't being committed above the 10th floor yourself?
Oh, no. I spoke to Pete Wolfenden.
Right. Okay. So you heard him say that firefighters aren't being committed past the 10th floor. Pete Wolfenden had the discussion with him as to why and reported that back to you. Is that how it went?
I believe Pete Wolfenden spoke to him, yeah.
Okay. And what was the reason given to Pete Wolfenden, do you know, about why crews weren't being committed above the 10th floor?
I wasn't given a reason.
Right. Did you know what the conditions were like inside the tower when this decision was made, not to commit crews above the 10th floor?
Only from my own personal collation of information from BA crews coming out. I was trying to paint a clear picture in my own mind, because of course that's what we do as officers. They would have already briefed the bridgehead. I was remote from the bridgehead, so the only way I could ascertain what the conditions were within the building was if I asked them myself.
Yes.
It's not information that I had no requirement to share that. It was my own personal information.
From the information you were getting from those people you spoke to, did that conflict with or agree with what the station manager had said about crews not being committed above the 10th floor?
I have no... the accuracy of the 10th floor was unclear to me, but but the information I'd been getting from firefighters referencing the congestion, the deteriorating conditions, the heat, and the challenges that they'd faced, I think that it was a fair assumption that things were getting quite difficult in there.
Right, okay. Did you have any thoughts at that time about what advice was being given to residents still in the building in the light of what you heard about crews not being committed above the 10th floor?
This information stopped me in my tracks.
Yes.
I struggled for a split second with this information, hence the reason I shared it with Pete Wolfenden. So a lot of things passed through my mind. I'm sure that was one of the things. It's not, as I've mentioned to you yesterday, the thoughts that pass through our mind are not conscious thoughts, they're instinctive thoughts, and how we instinctively respond to stuff. So I'm sure that was one of the thoughts that may have passed through my mind.
Right.
But it's not a conscious thought that I would seek an answer for.
Pete Wolfenden, in his witness statement, and again, as I say, we'll need to explore this, says that during the discussion he had with Group Manager Welch, he thought that there was some miscommunication at the Bridgehead, because the Bridgehead were telling crews to fight the fire, whereas the FSG information was concentrated on finding people. Now, can you comment on that?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, he says that during his discussion with Group Manager Welch, which he describes, he took away the idea that there was a miscommunication because the ECB were telling crews to fight the fire, whereas the FSG watch managers, which would include you, were trying to find people. Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense, but I'm not sure that that's in a very clear context. Okay. I think that to add some clarity, in our mindset, having been remote for such a long time, we were still of the opinion that we were carrying out search and rescue.
Yes.
And there was briefings taking place to fight fire, which didn't marry up to what we thought the aim was.
Right.
So,
do you remember a conflict or discovering that there was a miscommunication about what the strategy was?
I do, yes.
How was that resolved, that conflict or that miscommunication?
I can't answer for the communication that took place between Pete Wolfenden and Group Manager Welch.
Right.
I can only speak for myself.
Now, turning on to page 15 of your statement, in the third paragraph, you describe there a verbal conflict. And you say, between the hours of 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., a verbal conflict took place between Group Manager Welch and Group Manager Watson. I don't know what was said, but it was enough to upset Watch Manager Watson. It transpired that there was FSG information being shared directly to the Group Manager without my knowledge. I approached Group Manager Welch to try to ascertain what was going on and where this information was coming from. He did not acknowledge me, so I assertively asked him to come to the FSG wall to have a look to see if our information corresponded. Now, just pausing there, when you say that there was a verbal conflict and it transpired that there was FSG information being shared directly to the Group Manager without your knowledge, what did you yourself hear about those things?
The information via FSG, the information being shared with the Bridgehead, that refers to me seeing the control information forms being handed directly to the Bridgehead.
When you say a verbal conflict took place and you don't know what was said, how do you know a verbal conflict took place between Group Manager Welch and Group Manager Watson and Watch Manager Watson? How do you know? Because
that was discussed by Watch Manager Watson and Station Manager Wolfenden in my presence.
Right.
I can't give you the detail of that information.
Okay. And do you know what the conflict was?
You would have to ask Watch Manager Watson. I think that when I wrote this statement, I think conflict's probably a bit of a strong language.
Right.
Disagreement or debate.
Healthy discussion.
Healthy discussion's a great word.
Okay. And you say, as I've read to you, that you went to Group Manager Welch to try to ascertain what was going on and where this information was coming from. Did you find out how this system of direct FSG information going to Group Manager Welch had come about?
I didn't know.
Okay. Did Group Manager Welch say anything to you about this system of FSG information going directly to him and bypassing you? Right. And as I've shown you, you asked him to look at your wall and the list you were working from. And you say, in the third sentence from the end, I cannot remember which floor, but he only asked for all the FSG calls going up to this floor.
That's correct.
So do you mean by that there was a particular floor he pointed at and said, I only want FSG information up to that floor?
No. During the verbal discussion with myself and Paul Watson, it became apparent, and I've seen it written on the wall yesterday.
Yes.
And I took note of it. It says nothing above 15th.
Okay, should we look at that? That's 5774 again. See if we can find nothing above the 15th. Now, we can get a fuller picture of the wall by looking at a different document, but what are you referring to?
It's there somewhere.
You think nothing above the 15th
Is it a bigger wall?
There is a bigger wall.
Yeah, should we look at the bigger picture?
If we can go to MET 15815. That's the complete photograph of the wall, although it's not as legible. Can you see anything on that?
Oh, I'm looking. I definitely saw it. I was wrote it down.
Well, what we have on this wall is, if you pan out, above 10 EDBA, below 10 SDBA.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to ask you about in a moment. But you mentioned nothing about you mentioned writing something. Well, you mentioned there being something on this wall about nothing going above the 15th. I'm not sure I can see that.
No. Nevertheless, I definitely saw it in evidence yesterday because I've written it here.
Right.
So, in the evidence that you provided me yesterday, there will be something that says nothing above the 15th.
Do you remember getting information that crews were not, or crews were struggling to get above the 15th floor? Because you mentioned the 15th just now. So,
I remember crews struggling.
yes, but to get above the 15th floor.
No, there was no specifics. There was that they were.
Right.
Nobody came down and said that they were particularly struggling to get above the 15th. They were coming down and they were exhausted. Some of them could barely articulate themselves. They pushed themselves to far, far beyond what we expect from human beings. So there were no specific points about the 15th. They were struggling. They were struggling full stop.
Right. Can I just put something to you that Senior Operations Manager Joe Smith, who was in the control room from about 2:15 or so, said in her evidence, and that was, and I'm summarising it, that she had heard at around that time and up to, say, 2:45, 2:50, that crews were having difficulties getting above the 15th floor.
I wouldn't be able to confirm anything about that.
Right. DSA Fenton says in his statement that crews were struggling to get above the 15th floor at that point in time. Is that something you heard at that point in time?
Throughout the evening, the crews were reporting of their challenges.
Right. Can I go back then to the white wall, as it were, the 5774? It doesn't actually matter which we use, but this is the clearer one. Do you know who wrote above 10 EDBA, below 10 SDBA?
No.
You don't know who wrote that?
No.
Wasn't you?
No,
I take
wasn't
it.
me.
Right. Do you know roughly when that was written?
I don't know. Sorry.
Do you know why that was written?
It would suggest to me that above the 10th floor they're going to use EDBA, and below the 10th floor they're going to use SDBA.
Yeah, well, that's what it says. But when you left at 4:30 or so,
Yes.
do you remember whether those words and numbers were on the wall or not?
I don't recall that being written there.
Right. Now, on page 15, going back to it, you say at the end of the paragraph we've been looking at, when you say that Welch only asked for the FSG call, all the FSG calls going up to this floor, I then said, but what about the floors above? There are still people up there that are self-rescuing. He did not answer and just walked off. You then say, I informed Station Manager Wolfenden of this issue, who radioed the command unit to confirm what FSG calls we had floor by floor. And then you go on to say, in the third line, I transcribed the information onto the wall as Station Manager Wolfenden transmitted. Using this information, I made another list on the wall next to my original list, drawing a grid table that we went through systematically. Now, is that the list on the left or the list on the right? Perhaps we should have the white wall back, the yellow wall back up again. That's 15815. We've covered a little bit of this yesterday, but I just want to nail it down by reference to your statement. So if we can have that up. We looked yesterday at the three lists and the grid on the very far right. Can you tell us which list you're referring to in that paragraph of your statement I've just read to you, when you say I made another list next to my original list?
So can we zoom in to the right-hand side of this bracket? So, from recollection, we had started writing the numbers. You see in brackets where it says 94?
Yes.
We'd started writing the numbers there, and then it occurred to me that actually this would be far clearer if we were to draw a grid. So I drew a grid, which is the grid on the right-hand side.
Right, so it's that. So when we go back to the lift on the left-hand side, that's not that list. That's a list that you started, I think you told us yesterday, when you moved down to the ground floor. The Bridgehead moved down to the ground floor.
The lift on the left-hand.
Yes.
Yeah, it just that was a continuation of receiving the slips.
Yes, I see.
Okay. Once Pete Wolfenden started receiving information via handheld radio, we were on this side underneath the existing plaque.
So summarising it, the first list is the middle list, which you do. The second list is the one on the left, which is a continuation list, which you do with one or two entries from Pete Wolfenden taken from slips.
That'd be accurate.
And the third list is the one on the right, taken from what Pete Wolfenden got over the radio from CU7.
Correct.
And then transmitted to you, and you wrote up.
Correct.
Right. You say in your statement, at that point, I realised my original FSG list was incorrect, as there were far more numbers on the second list. This clearly showed there was a breakdown in communication between the management within the foyer. So are you comparing the right-hand list, which was small, with the left-hand list, which is longer?
No. Well, the information that was being transmitted, there was a lot of information that the command unit was going floor by floor, or somebody at the command unit was going floor by floor.
Right.
And the information that was being transmitted, it felt like there was more information coming in than what had been listed initially.
Right. Okay.
So I was doing my best to scribe the information that Pete was passing to me verbally, but it felt like there was a lot more information coming in.
Okay. Can I go back to 5776, or rather to 5776, and just go back to this question of the 15th floor? I had not put to you this document, which is actually a better copy of the right-hand list as well. On the very far right, underneath the yellow wires, next to the door jamb,
Oh yeah.
you can see. Well, can you read that out for us?
It says 0430, nothing above the 15th.
Right. Is
I
that
knew I'd
your
seen
writing?
it. I knew I'd seen it.
Yes.
Well done.
Is that your writing?
No, that's not my writing.
Do you?
Oh. It's hard to tell. It may be, but that was the exact time that I had to leave the incident. So I don't want to say it is my writing. It looks similar.
Right. Do you have a recollection of being of writing that information on a wall?
I have a recollection of the information.
Right. Okay.
It would be in my nature to make a log of something like that.
Right. Now, I think I may have asked you this yesterday, but will you forgive me if I just go back to it? If you can keep the picture up we've just been looking at. You just told us, by way of clarification, and I'm very grateful, that the right-hand list you wrote down as having heard that information transmitted to you by Pete Wolfenden, who got it by radio. Now, looking at one of those numbers in that list, it says 161 in the middle, with 19 on the left and 10 on the right.
Correct.
Would that signify floor 19, 10 persons?
It would.
Are you sure you got that by radio, or was it possible that you might have got that by a control information slip?
That list that you see there,
Yes.
you can see the flat numbers going up in
Yes.
in numerical order.
Yes.
The floor denote the 18 and 19 denotes the floor,
Yeah.
and the information that had been transmitted would have been the number of persons
Right.
on the right.
Okay.
That said, this information was coming from the command unit that was dealing with FSG,
Right.
and we were going through numerical order. We were going through the floor by floor, and we were going floor by floor, and it may not have necessarily been fresh information. It was the information that they had at that moment in time.
I understand. Can I just then show you a document that I'm sure I did show you yesterday, and we may therefore be covering the same ground. But if you go to LFB *01922, page 1, this is a yellow version, or yellow copy, of a control information slip that Watch Manager Sadler did And we know that because he marked it with an 11 at the top, and it says 161, 19th floor, 10 people.
Yeah.
And he told us that he was sending the white versions into the tower via a runner and sending the yellow versions back to the command unit. Is it possible that the command unit was giving you this information a second time later in the night that they'd had earlier in the night?
I think that if we were to look back at the wall, you would see that I've detailed this information on the wall, which means that I did receive it by the form of a white control information form.
Right, well, if we can just have a look at 5774 again, just to finish this point off. The full version. No, 5774, please. Now we have 161 halfway down your first list, but no 10p next to it. So I'm just wondering whether, in light of that, you had you got when you wrote 10p next to 161 on the third list on the right, you had that information by radio, or whether in fact you had it sent to you by slip.
As I said yesterday, we did receive duplicates.
Yeah.
And I think so. My first receipt of fire survival guidance at 161 may have been a control information form that didn't denote the number of people in there.
Right.
And maybe the second time it was received, it denoted the number of people, and maybe the third time it was communicated, it was via the command unit.
Right. Okay. You say maybe. I mean, is that your recollection, even if a vague one, or are you just trying to work out what happened?
I think that, well, I can categorically tell you that if the numbers are written on the wall, then I received a control information form.
Yeah.
And that has been communicated
Yeah.
in the system in which I've repeated,
Yeah.
I've mentioned. If that information is now listed in the list to the right-hand side, that has been received at the time in which we were correlating the numbers, and it looks as if we're creating a list from 15th floor upwards to identify the numbers, the people, the FSG callers. If you look at the right-hand list, you'll see it starts at 15.
Yes, I see. And does that relate in any way to the evidence you gave earlier, or your recollection earlier, about crews not being committed above the 15th floor? Something of which we've seen on the wall at 4:30.
It would be in line with that.
In line with that. And therefore, can you remember even roughly when you started this right-hand list?
I left the incident ground. The time log in which I left the left this area was 04:30. It was a short time between that, before that.
Yes, thank you. I've got one or two more questions for you.
That's fine.
I was going to ask you, Mr. Millett, how much
Well, one
longer
or
do
two,
you
and then
think-
we must have a break.
Well, I mean, do you think you've got 5 minutes, 10
No,
minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes?
2 minutes. No, I may even try and beat that. Mr. Williams, we know that you left the incident ground at about 4:30.
Correct.
Did you do a handover?
I had a brief conversation with Pete Wolfenden, and it was so that it was not necessary to do a handover because we've been working so closely with one another.
So far as you're concerned, is this right, that you left the incident ground
There was a physical handover of the control information forms.
Yes.
From me to him. He had joined me at the point in which we were completing the second list, which was on the left of the wall. We had been working together in a system that he had decided upon. So I almost relinquished my plan, and we went on to use his idea, which was to go through it in floor order.
Yes.
So the handover we had was a physical handover of information.
Right. Thank you very much. And so far as you're concerned, did he continue the work? Or the idea was that he would continue the work that you've been doing up to that point.
He would continue. Himself and Paul Watson would continue from where I had left.
Yeah. Mr. Williams, thank you very much. I've got no further questions. We should have a break now, Mr. Chairman. It may be sensible just to have a break and not release the witness quite yet, just in case there may be things that occur to me.
Yes. Well, this does happen, Mr. Williams. When counsel's got to the end of his questions, it's surprising how sometimes some more emerge.
Yeah.
So we'll take a break now until 11 o'clock.
Okay.
And if you'd like to come back at 11 o'clock, we'll see if there are any further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence. Good. 11 o'clock then, please. Thank you. Right, I think Mr. Williams is on his way.
Very good.
All right, ready to go on?
Certainly.
If necessary.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It is necessary, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thought it-
Mr. Williams, thank you for coming back. I'd only have a few more questions.
It's fine.
First of all, can I show you a document which is MET 000015731? Now, I'll tell you what this is. This is an extract from Crew Manager Batterby's notebook. And what he says is that he was instructed by Watch Manager Sadler to go from the car bonnet where they were collating FSGs early on to the bridgehead, collect the information from the bridgehead and bring it straight back to him at the car bonnet outside the tower. I'm summarising his evidence, but that is what he says. And for those who are interested in it, it's day 12 at pages 136 to 139 of the transcript. Now, I'm showing you this because what I want to ask you is whether you have any recollection of seeing a fireman's notebook, firefighter's notebook, with a list of numbers on it, with ticks on it, like that.
I don't recall seeing the notebook,
Right.
but having been looking at the wall over the last day or so, I do recognise those numbers in that sequence.
Yes, and we can no doubt tie up the numbers to the wall, or try to. And we can do that. But my simple question is: does this trigger a recollection in your mind, whereby numbers from the bridgehead came to you at an early stage when you started writing your list?
As I said earlier on, I have a recollection of someone narrating verbally
Okay,
a
right,
list of numbers.
right.
I think that if this was cross-referenced with the wall in which I was working, it is feasible that could be the list of numbers from a firefighter notebook that was transcribed onto the wall.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Now, can I just do one more very small exercise? Could you look, please, first of all, at MET 000015815, which is the beige version or yellow version of the full picture of the wall, which we were looking at yesterday and this morning. 15815. There it is. And you can see that in the middle column, we just have that blown up. 3 up from the bottom, you can see 193 with 22 next to it, 10p. Do you see that?
I do.
So that when you wrote that there, I'm assuming, on the basis of the evidence you've given so far. Yes?
Sorry?
You wrote that up on the wall, did you?
If it's on the wall and it's
Yeah.
in that list,
Yes.
I will have received it by a control information form.
Now, if we go to another picture, we can keep that on the left-hand side, Mr. Documents Director, if we could, and go please now to MET 000015625. You can scan the list there, but you can see, well, this is the list that Louisa de Silva wrote up on the wall on the 3rd floor when the bridgehead was there between about 2:20 and about 3:10, 3:08, 3:10. This photograph was taken at about 3:08. So if you look at that list, one can scan it in vain. One does not see, or we haven't been able to see, any inscription on that wall for flat 193. Now, I may be wrong, but this isn't your writing, so you would be in no better position than we would. If we're right, and there is no 193 on that wall, on the 3rd floor, does that does that tell us, can you help with this, that you had information about 193, which you wrote up, which did not make it up to the Bridgehead?
Sorry, could you zoom in on the second line where it says 22? Could you zoom in on the 19 something there?
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't that look like a 193?
Well, we can debate that. I mean, this isn't your writing.
No.
And it's Louisa de Silva's writing.
It is, but I don't have a 195, do I?
So you think that's 195 by reason of the fact that you
No, I
you
think
don't.
I can't see 195 written on the FSG wall that I was working from.
Well,
But I do see a 193 and 22, and the evidence that you're presenting me says 22, 19, and there's a question around whether that's a 3 or a 5. I would argue that it's feasible that could be a 5.
Yeah, well, that's
Or a 3, sorry.
In which case, how do you explain that Louisa de Silva's got 193, but you don't? Sorry, 195, but you don't.
So we're arguing about the way in which a number's been written.
Yeah,
the
well,
way
I
it's
think we're
been read.
debating the correct way to understand that evidence, which perhaps this witness can't help.
Yes, I
But
agree.
his point,
Yes.
his point is that what looks like 19, or we have assumed is 195 in the right-hand picture, is actually 193, which would then correlate with his wall. I think that's what you're saying, isn't
I
it?
think that in a dynamic situation, sir, it's feasible that somebody may have not been in the clearest of handwriting.
Yeah.
And that since I don't have a 195, but I do have a 193, and if Louisa de Silva could be forgiven of misreading a 5 and a 3, they're very close and similar looking numbers. I think
that's
that would be
we'll have
something
to
for
decide.
Louisa to answer.
Yes, it's not. Okay. Well, I've done my best with trying to trace it through.
Yeah.
I don't think we can take that any further. Mr. Williams, can I just say thank you very much? I have no further questions for you.
Thank you.
I just want to say that we're very grateful to you for coming to the inquiry and for helping us with our investigations. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to add my thanks as well. As you probably realise from the various questions that have been put to you, understanding the communication of fire survival guidance information has not been entirely straightforward.
No,
It's been
I'm
quite
sure.
challenging for us. So
Absolutely.
your evidence has been very helpful, and I'm very grateful to you for
Thank
coming
you,
along
sir.
to give it. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Willett. Now, what's next?
Now, Mr. Chairman, what is next, or who is next, are two firefighters whom Mr. Kinnear is going to ask some questions
Yes.
of. I'm going to turn over the podium or the lectern, such as it is, to him in a moment. I don't think it's wise to have any more than any longer than a 5-minute break.
Well, it's usually useful to have a very short break just
Yes.
to rearrange the furniture
Let's do
as
that.
far as necessary and get people organised. So,
Yes, let's do that. Before I do, can I just say something about a forthcoming witness tomorrow? Tomorrow being Wednesday, we've got programmed in Station Manager Mulholland
yes.
and then Sharon Darby in the afternoon. I just want to say something about Mr. Mulholland. We have his statement, but we also have just had disclosed to us on Friday last week some 39 exhibits to his statement. Those cannot be disclosed immediately in readiness for tomorrow because they need to go through our disclosure process. So what I was going to propose was that we keep the timetable as it is, that I examine him on the material we have, and that if there are any questions which arise as a result of the inevitably later disclosure of the exhibits, then core participants who have questions from them can submit those to the inquiry in writing, and we will pursue those and get a further statement from him in an organised way.
Yes. Well, it would certainly be a good thing to hear Mr. Mulholland's evidence tomorrow.
Yes.
Because he's obviously been programmed to
Yes.
come and taken off other duties.
Yes, exactly.
Have you raised this with counsel for the
I
court
have not,
participants?
which is why I'm raising it through you
Yeah.
with them now in this rather indirect way. This is something that emerged really only overnight last night, and I'm afraid I haven't had time to,
No, I don't
to
think
raise
you
it
can be.
in any other forum.
I don't think you can be criticised for that because the materials come through
Yes.
quite late in the day.
Yes.
The course you propose sounds to me at first blush to be a sensible one,
Yeah.
but maybe it would be a good thing if you could just speak to counsel for the court participants who are particularly interested in his evidence
Yes.
to check whether they're content with that.
Yes.
And if not, well, we'll see where we go.
Yes. I mean, their difficulty will, I suppose, be that they won't know how important or unimportant the 39 exhibits are. We've taken a preliminary view, a fairly advanced preliminary view about them,
Yeah.
but they won't know until they see them. And so all they'll be able to do is reserve their position, I
Yes.
suspect. But I'm commending the idea of keeping on
Well,
with the programme.
Your suggestion is keep him in the list for tomorrow.
Exactly.
Take his evidence and see whether any further questions can be dealt with in writing.
Exactly.
If they can, so much the better. If they can't, well, we'll consider another way of resolving it.
Yes.
All right?
I'm going to leave it with I'll leave it like that then.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, well, I'll rise for 5 minutes, or at least until 20 past 11, just for the changeover. Yes? Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Keir.
Can I call Marc Aston-O'Donovan?
Please repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and
nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aston-O'Donovan.
Good morning.
I hope you're comfortable there.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, sir. Good morning. Would you please confirm your name for the record?
Marc Aston-O'Donovan.
Thank you very much for coming to the inquiry to give evidence today. It's very much appreciated. Apologies, there's just a hand signal there just to check that the microphone is on. It is illuminated green.
No problem.
It looks right.
Yeah, I'm on green.
Well, now, can you hear me?
No, you're not coming through either. Just
Oh, well, that's very serious,
that now might be.
Can you hear that? Oh, no.
Yes, we're all
Yes, now they're
live. Good.
For better or worse, you can now hear me.
Right.
First of all, hopefully in front of you have a blue folder, and if you open that and turn to the first tab, hopefully you'll find the statement you provided to the police. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And behind that, hopefully you'll find two exhibits that support that statement. Is that right?
Correct.
And finally, hopefully there's a copy of your contemporaneous note. Is that right?
Also correct, yes.
And have you read all of those documents recently?
Yes.
And do you confirm that the contents of those documents are true?
Yes, they were true to my belief at the time of writing. There is some translation issues from the detective who scribed it, but yeah, true.
We'll deal with those as we go
Absolutely,
through.
yeah.
Thank you. And are you content for those documents to stand as your evidence of the inquiry?
Yes, I am.
Now, I'm not going to go through every line of your statement or contemporaneous note. I'm just going to draw out certain topics from your evidence. Is that okay?
That's fine.
And if my questions aren't clear, please say so and I'll rephrase them.
Absolutely.
Now, if I could start first of all with basics. Is it right that you've been a firefighter since October 2003?
That's correct, yes.
And what was your rank in June 2017?
I was a temporary watch manager.
And at the time of the fire, you were based at Ealing, is that right?
Correct.
Now, the first substantive topic I'd like to discuss with you today is training and practical experience. And could I ask you, for these purposes, to turn to page 13 of your statement?
No, you can either use the hard copy in the file, or, as you'll see, it'll come up on the screen.
Okay, right.
And the screen
That's
can sometimes
probably
be
easier.
helpful. Well, because you'll find the
They're going
passage
to highlight it for me.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, sir.
Top paragraph, the first line, you say this: following the Lacknell House fire, we do have regular training on high-rise buildings. First of all, what particular training regarding the lessons from Lacknell did you receive?
Right, so following this incident, a publication was released, Operational News, which then links to case studies and information and training that we can do. Is computer-based training that's filtered through to the station, and then I cascade that information to my watch in a training environment. So that will then be linked to the brigade's high-rise firefighting policy, and we've got available to us PowerPoint presentations which detail high-rise firefighting and facilities in high-rise buildings.
From your own review of those materials and the training you received via the LFB, what particular learning points did you take from the LFB's experience at Lacknell House?
So the main point that came from Lacknell House was the possibility of the Coanda effect and how fire can spread on the external face of a building.
And have you heard of the fire at Shepherd's Court?
I haven't before this inquiry. This is something that I've just picked up from watching other people's evidence.
Can we take from that that you haven't received any training in respect to the particular learning points arising from Shepherd's Court?
Yes, you can. That's answer no to that.
Turning back to your statement, you say we do have regular training on high-rise buildings. How regular is regular?
Right, so we have a borough training plan. I operate in the borough of Ealing. There's 4 fire stations in Ealing, and we have a borough training plan which will make sure that we cover relevant topics throughout the year. So within that training plan, then high-rise firefighting will come up in the borough training plan. I'll put an estimation in as once a month for a theory-based, and then once a month for a practical-based session. And then I'll deliver that training in my own way, whether I'll use the policy note, a whiteboard to detail what training we're going to give, or the computer-based training package as the theory side of it. And then on the practical side of it, we'll train in the yard or at another station, or we might do a familiarisation on a high-rise within our ground to talk about what facilities are available to us.
That's useful. Looking at the particular phenomena, the Coanda effect, what training do you receive about the most effective firefighting techniques to apply to deal with that effect?
So the training is very limited. I understand that that's your question, but to broaden that, what we would be aware of and what's cascaded throughout the watch is covering jets, use of aerial appliances, being aware of wind direction, being aware of certain dangers on the incident ground, like sighting of appliances, things like that. But in answer to your question, the actual training is very limited on.
And did you get any training that covered the particular risks posed by cladding in the context of high-rise fires?
Answer no.
What training do you receive in respect of what to do if there's been a breach of compartmentation?
Again, this is limited, and it will come down to... There's an overview of training where you're taught about how to dynamically risk assess and how to safe systems of work that you'll have in place, like high-rise firefighting or basement procedures, which will have a broad spectrum of what to do if compartmentation's breached, but there's no particular package or particular training given for breach of compartmentation.
Okay. And would training cover such topics as when and how to carry out a partial or total evacuation of a high-rise building?
No, there is a policy on firefighter emergency and tactical withdrawal, which encroaches on the subject of evacuating. But
stopping there, is tactical withdrawal, is that tactical withdrawal of firefighters as opposed to withdrawal of residents of a building, for example?
That's correct.
Would the training cover the concept of stay put and the circumstances in which it's right to withdraw stay put?
No, we are all aware of the stay put policy, but there's no training as the decision when to change that policy from stay put to evacuation.
Thank you. Could we go back to page 13 of your statement and that top paragraph and the second line onwards, which reads, I organised a 4-pump fire exercise at Acton within the last 6 months, specifically around high-rise buildings. It started with a lecture and an update of FF's policy around high-rise buildings, together with a training package and a practical drill. The drill was run like a real live incident and took place in Acton's Tower. First of all, dealing with the lecture element of that, who provided it?
That would be myself.
And did you prepare the subject matter of that lecture?
No, that was done using the computer-based training package, which is a PowerPoint presentation that's available to us.
Did that computer-based presentation package, did it refer to documents such as GRA 3.2?
No.
Did it refer to policy 633?
Not as I'm aware.
Do you provide any bespoke training yourself, i.e. prepared by yourself for your watch, separate and distinct to the training that's provided from the LFB centrally?
Yes, so if we've had an incident in a high-rise building, or we've been to a high-rise building where we can foresee that there might be some issues or some kind of tactical complications, then the bespoke training would be using a whiteboard. As a watch, we'll talk about how we're going to best approach that incident. If the appliance can only be sited a long way from the dry rising main, for example, we'll talk about how we're going to overcome that. If there's a complicated layout on the floors, we'll talk about how we're going to do that. So it's bespoke in that sense that it'd be a group discussion and a whiteboard to overcome certain scenarios.
Thank you. In the bit of the statement which I quoted, you referred to an update of FF's policy around high-rise buildings. Can you remember now what that update covered?
I'm afraid I can't. It may be, I'm not sure if this is before or after Grenfell. We were, a new piece of equipment was introduced. There's a list of equipment that we have to take to a bridgehead, a minimum list, and that's now self-contained in a bag. It's
Is
called
this
a
the fire bag?
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure if that was before or after. That could have a relevance to the training that I was given.
Thank you. And you mentioned that the drill was run like a real live incident took place in Acton's Tower. First of all, how high is Acton's Tower?
Yeah, that's a little bit generous to say a real life incident. Acton's Tower is a 4-floor tower. So you make the best of what you've got. The reason that we chose to do it at Acton's Tower rather than my own station's ground at Ealin's Tower is Acton's Tower has a room that comes off, I believe it's the first floor, which would give you an area to set up a bridgehead and to try and have some little extra bit of reality to it, but it's still a Jacob's ladder tower, so there's no stairs that go up, and so the reason we're saying it's a real life incident, we're practicing what equipment to take to a bridgehead, setting up a bridgehead, making sure the bridgehead's set up in the right place, and then a little bit of communication type stuff after that. And there's a message that you send once everything's implemented, and that's high-rise procedures implemented. So we speak about when can that message be sent, when's a safe system of work declared. So
and presumably the drill you that simulated the fire was an internal as opposed to an external fire, is that right?
Correct.
How practicable is it to drill on the basis of an external fire, whether at Acton or at Ealing or anywhere else?
Not really, because all our towers are, there's no towers that, Wembley's got a tower that's 7 or 8 floors high with some stairs, so you can see how far a jet might reach on that tower, but there's no towers really above 8 floors. So when we talk about it, it's just what have we got available in the fire brigade, how high can that go?
And have you been able to carry out a drill in a real live occupied building or not?
Not occupied, no. I've attended a drill also on Acton's ground, which was in a tower block which was about to be demolished. And we had, again, a limited drill there, but with a little bit of real fire and setting up a bridgehead and comms.
And when you say limited, did it involve any consideration of what to do should there be a breach of compartmentation, for example?
No, that wasn't brought in, neither was any external fire.
And was there any sort of covering of partial or total evacuation, how best to carry it out and how safely to carry it out?
No, it wasn't spoken about during that drill.
What were the principal lessons that your watch learned from the Acton drill?
From the drill that
yes.
A lot of that was around setting up a bridgehead, messages from incidents, but it must be stressed that this is a small fire in one flat, one part of one flat, and what messages we're going to send from that incident.
Thank you. Mr. Aston-O'Donovan, I'm now going to turn to the night itself.
Okay.
And if I can ask you some basic questions about basic details there. Am I right that you were riding in Golf 251
Correct.
And your crew members were firefighters Barker, Green, Kwan and Maxwell. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you were mobilised at 0130, on the road at 0133. Does that sound right?
The timings for me, I wouldn't be able to clarify exactly, but I'm sure the computer technology that we have on the MDT will be better placed than I am to give you that detail.
Okay. And we have an arrival time for Golf 251 from the GPS data as 0157. Does that sound about right, subject to the limit caveat you've just given?
Yep, that sounds reasonable.
Can I ask you next about the MDT itself? And could I ask you to turn to page 2 of your statement and the second paragraph, line 4? And you say, on this occasion, we were getting very little information coming through on the MDT. And then you go on to say, the MDT had no information, but it was the same for all appliances. First of all, do you know why you were getting very little information via the MDT?
Answer no.
Generally, how reliable is the MDT in your experience?
From my personal experience, I'd say 90%.
And in the 10% when it isn't reliable, how easy is it to remedy the problem and get the information you need to respond to the fire you're responding to?
Up until a rough guess 2010, we didn't have MDTs. So most people are aware what to do if that technology is not available. We've got geographias on the appliances. We have route cards in the watch room to be able to get us to places. And a lot of the information that we get on the MDT is also on a call slip. What isn't available is the information from our operational risk database.
And following on from that point, at the end of this quotation, you say the MDT had no information, but it was the same for all appliances. To be clear, when you say the MDT had no information, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so the MDT links to an incident. When we are assigned to an incident, the MDT on the appliance is then linked to all the information on that incident. On this particular occasion, it wasn't linked to any incident. We were only mobilised via the station and the call slip that came through on our teleprinter.
Okay. So just to understand, you were mobilised. What information did you have whilst you were en route to Grenfell about the nature of the incident you were going to be dealing with once you got there?
A call slip that said we've been mobilised as part of the 20 pump fire attendance. I know what other appliances are part of that attendance. I believe it would have said high-rise fire. There would have been no information about how many floors or where the fire was or anything like that. And then the only other information I'm gathering then is from radio traffic. So other appliances asking control for information. I don't believe that any radio traffic was coming from the incident ground itself at that stage.
Okay, if I could stop you there, let's take it stage by stage.
Yeah.
You say later on in the next paragraph on this page, on this occasion I didn't search the MDT for information, floors, flats, etc. Why didn't you search it for that information?
This is one of these translation issues from the police officer. So basically, if it's not linked to the incident, for me to be able to, if there is information on the operational risk database for Grenfell Tower, for me to find that information, I have to find Grenfell Tower on the map on a fire ground that I'm unfamiliar with, and then work out how to action the icon to be able to pull up the operational risk database. With everything that's going on, that's a long process when you're driving on the bell, and it's pretty much unfeasible for... When we're attached to an incident, we get a red dot over the incident, and we've got the MDT points straight at it, and it's simple as pressing a button, and there's everything you need. If you're not assigned, it's a lot of scrolling. And
how long does that process take when you're not assigned? Just to give us an idea as to the sort of length of time involved.
I would say for me, from start to finish, to get the operational risk database up on the MDT would be 5 minutes.
dealing now with the radio traffic you heard whilst you were en route, you mentioned in the statement that you became aware of the seriousness of the incident because of the amount of information being requested from the control room. Can you remember what type of information, first of all, was being requested from the control room?
The majority of that was other OICs, other appliance commanders, stating what I've stated, that there's nothing shown on their MDT. Can they have some information on the incident?
And do you recall hearing any FSG information being passed over the radio?
Answer no.
Now, the next topic I'd like to discuss with you is your arrival at the tower.
Okay.
And if we turn again to page 2 of your statement, the 4th paragraph and line 5, which starts, it seemed to be one or maybe two sides of the tower that were 100% alight. The flames were travelling up. It didn't take long, but once we got there, the flames were moving around the tower. I again spoke to the crew and reiterated what I had said earlier to them, to remain safe and stay close to me until we were given a task. Given what you saw, what professional assessment did you form as to whether compartmentation had been breached or not?
So we approached the incident from the A40 onto the elevated section, and the visual indications from that far away from the fire is that it was very serious. You could see a whole face of the building that was alight. So our first thoughts when looking at the building was that it must be scaffolding and netting on the outside. You wouldn't expect the side of a building to be alight. So that's your first thought. But as far as whether compartmentation's been breached or not, at that stage, I didn't really have a thought process, but I would say I'm looking at it thinking the external skins are light, but I wouldn't be necessarily thinking that that's gone into all the floors.
When you say the external skin is alight, had you previously attended any fires involving external
I've got
cladding?
No experience of it whatsoever.
And so that was a working assumption you'd come...
Absolutely, and that's not a professional assumption. That's the same assumption that a member of the public would think as well.
Thank you. You instructed the crew to stay close to me until we were given a task. This phrase appears to anticipate being given orders on arrival by a responsible officer. Is that a fair observation on that evidence?
Yes, yeah.
You go on to say in that paragraph that as we got closer, it became quite apparent that what I had asked my crew to do and stick close to me was never going to happen because of the dynamics of the incident. So I said to my crew, do what you have to do and I'll get hold of you. And so they went off and did whatever roles they were tasked to do. Again, does this phrase mean that you anticipated the crew would be split up, but a responsible officer would be giving them direction on arrival?
Answer yes.
On arrival at a large incident, what or who would you expect to meet who would give you the initial direction as to who to see and what to do?
Okay, so when you arrive at an incident, as the officer in charge, my role would be to go to either the incident commander or the command unit. The incident commander may detail me with a job, and then I'd hand my roll call board to the incident command pump and detail my crew to do the task that I've been asked to do. If it's a more dynamic incident and larger, it'd be to the control unit. I'd hand my roll call board in at the control unit, and then I'd be detailed a task from there. Would you like me to continue?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So on this particular occasion, when I arrived, it wasn't like a normal incident where there's definite jobs to do, whether you're in charge of obtaining a water supply or in charge of pump operating or water relay or breathing apparatus. There was so much to do and so many people asking for help that it was apparent that my crew, as we were walking over the hill from the leisure centre, would have to go in different directions. As I walked over, up two watch managers did say they needed particular things, and I split my crew in that kind of sense, and I went to the command unit.
Okay. Turning to page 3 of your statement, the third paragraph and the final 2 lines, you say, in terms of discussing aerial appliances, but it was never going to reach the height of the building due to the size of the building, the equipment we as the LFB have. Do you know the maximum height that the LFB's LPs can reach? Apologies, that's a bit like a promotion exam question.
It's a station manager sitting over there.
Sorry to test you now. Can you remember the maximum
I believe
height?
it's around 27 metres.
Okay. Do you know whether any fire and rescue services in the areas surrounding London have ALPs that can reach higher than that?
I don't believe so. I know there is some in the UK, but not surrounding, I don't believe.
Could I ask you to stay with page 3, go down to the last paragraph on that page and the second line, where the first and second line, I should say. On this particular occasion, the officer in charge of the command unit had a stack of nominal roll boards, would not be able to allocate a specific task. First, why was the officer in command of the in command of the command unit not able to allocate tasks?
Because of the speed and the dynamics that the incident was developing.
If he wasn't in a position to allocate specific tasks and give direction, who would be?
This is a difficult question to answer. Obviously, the responsibility for that would fall on the incident commander of the incident. But you must appreciate that with the best part of 20 appliances and 20 crews arriving at once, he's not going to be able to make those decisions very quick.
Did you ask who the incident commander was when you arrived?
I didn't know.
Were you told who the incident commander was?
I was aware because I know the local stations and I know who's in charge of that fireground that evening.
So did anyone specifically tell you who the incident commander was on date of, when you arrived at the scene?
No, answer that.
Absent the officer in command of the command unit being able to give you direction, absent contact with the incident commander, how do you go about identifying the right task for you to do that forms part of a coordinated firefighting response?
Okay, so some of this, for my particular crew, some of this was done already before I got to the command unit. As I said, we came over the brow of the hill and one watch manager said we need to get a water supply for this aerial. So I detailed 2 of my crew to do that, and around the same time another watch manager, I can't remember who this particular one was, we need support for the command unit, we need runners for the command unit. So the other 2 went there. So I detailed 2 to go to the command unit, 2 to help with the aerial, and I went to and then it was just about me finding a role for myself after that.
On arrival, what sense did you have of an overall direction to coordinating the firefighting response? What was there?
So my only experience coming over on arrival, what was those 2 tasks that I gave you, where I split my crew, and that seemed to be direct and purposeful.
Okay. Could I now talk with you about the attendance at the Bridgehead?
Yes.
And that I think I'm right in saying that you attended the Bridgehead and it was at the 3rd floor at that stage, is that right?
Correct, as far as I'm aware.
And if I could ask you to turn to page 4 of your witness statement and the 2nd paragraph and the 8th line, which I think contains the words Senior Officer Richard Welsh was in charge, but he didn't give us the briefing. This was done by another officer. First of all, do you know the officer who gave you that briefing?
I'm guessing Watch Manager Louisa da Silva, but I couldn't be 100%.
Could we limit it down
actually,
and say the officer was female?
No, I'm going to retract that. It was Watch Manager Brian O'Keefe.
Okay. Whilst you were waiting to go up the tower, did you understand what FSGs were passing and what prioritisation was being given to those FSGs?
Answer no. On arrival at the Bridgehead, I was first met by a crew manager from North Kensington who had a diagram of the floor layout, chinographed on the wall.
And if I could stop you there, just to help clarify the evidence. Paul, would you mind turning up MAD 2, which is MET 0001335-1? Now, is that your memory of the sketch plan that was shown to you by the crew manager from North Kent?
I'm sure his one was a little bit more detailed and a little bit closer than the actual floor plan that I've got in this folder.
So that's your rough
That's my
outline.
rough outline, as I was just describing something to the police officers who interviewed me.
As you were waiting to go up the tower, did you see any returning crews? Did you overhear any debriefing they gave to either the crew manager from North Cairn or to Brian O'Keefe?
Answer no.
You commend in your statement the briefing you were given. Can you remember the precise words or the gist of the words that the briefing contained?
My briefing was probably slightly different because my crew member, firefighter Green, has highlighted that we were in the process, this is something that's escaped my memory, which I found out about later. We were in the process of receiving a briefing for a fire survival guidance call. And during the start of that briefing, a call for firefighter emergency came in.
If I can stop you there.
Yes.
The FSG that you were initially briefed on, can you remember the flat or the floor it related to?
He did tell me a few days ago, and unfortunately that's escaped my memory.
Now, in your statement, you refer to the lifts. What information were you given regarding the operation of the lifts as part of your briefing?
It's as simple as the lifts aren't working.
Okay. Were you given an explanation as to why they weren't working?
Answer no.
Okay. Looking at the end of the second paragraph on page 4, I think it's 3 lines from the end of that paragraph, you say that in the briefing we were told that certain equipment was in certain areas and it became apparent that wasn't the case. Now, first of all, what equipment were you told as part of the briefing would be available and where?
So we were told that there'll be outside the lobby door, there'll be some hose, and we were given, is this the first word I said? We were given a branch. I believe we were given a branch at the Bridgehead during the briefing. So then we were told to go to the floor. The hoses there are available for us to set up for the dry riser.
And was Mr. Green carrying the branch then?
This escapes my memory. I can't remember because I had 2 breathing apparatus wears.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was the first wear or the second wear that we had the branch. But what I do know is when we got to the 12th floor, we didn't have the right equipment to have firefighting media to enter the floor.
Were you told how many hoses were plugged into the dry rising main in the tower?
No.
What information were you given regarding the reliability of radio communications as you went up the tower as part of the briefing?
No comms information, just apart from what our call sign was going to be, which is Ealing Pump Ladder 3.
So you were given no information, for example, regarding conditions on the stairwell as you went up?
Yes, from during the initial briefing as you enter the Bridgehead, before you're given a role, I believe it was crew manager Matt Sefton who was detailing us quite comprehensively on the floor layout and what the current conditions on the stairs were. I believe he might have had a breathing apparatus wear already, and then he was helping with coordinating the Bridgehead. But so we were fully aware of the floor layout, and that was available to us. He was saying where the smoke level was coming down to on the stairs.
Okay. Can we now turn to your first deployment? And if we go to the telemetry sheet, Paul, if it's possible to put that up on the screen. And then box 95, just 2 up from the bottom, you'll see working from left to right, SDBA, so standard duration breathing equipment, Ealing, then your name, and then in the green column tally out 256.50. Does that sound about right to you?
Again, I had absolutely no idea of the time, but if that's what it says, that sounds like it could be.
And just for the sake of completeness, if, Paul, we could scroll further towards the right to secure the end of wear column, and there you have your end of wear as 311.26.
Certainly sounds feasible, yes.
Now, if you'd arrived at the scene at 01:57, can you remember how long you'd been waiting at the Bridgehead before being deployed?
On that particular occasion, on the first wear, I wasn't long at the Bridgehead. I'm going to give you an estimation of 6 or 7 minutes from entering the third floor lobby to being under air.
Now, you and firefighter Green were deployed to rescue a missing firefighter on the 12th floor, is that right?
That's correct.
And at page 5, at the top paragraph, 7 lines down from the top, you described the briefing. We've dealt with smoke conditions in your previous answer. What information were you given regarding the conditions on the lobby of floor 12 itself? Can you remember?
No, I don't believe they had that information available.
As you went up the stairs to the 12th floor, you described conditions as okay until the 5th floor, but heavily smoke-logged from the 5th floor onwards. First of all, what colour was the smoke you encountered on the 5th floor onwards?
It's black smoke.
Could you see where it was coming from?
No.
Can you remember whether there was any firefighting equipment left on the staircase or not?
As per my statement, I've got no recollection of the actual stairs. I remember equipment in the lobby areas, and these would be rolled up hose. I can't remember any hose laid out actually on the stairs itself.
When you say the lobby areas, just to be clear...
Sorry, the landings outside the lobby areas.
Thank you. As you went up, what lobby doors, i.e. the doors leading from the stairwell to the lobbies themselves, were open and closed? Can you remember?
Can't give you no recollection. Sorry.
Going back to page 5, the first paragraph, and 5 lines from the end of that paragraph, you describe conditions on the stairwell as organised chaos. What was organised about it?
When I say organised chaos, what I meant was there didn't seem to be anybody standing around not knowing what they're going to do next. All the firefighters that I encountered had a purpose, and they seemed to be proactively doing something.
As you went up to the 12th floor, were you able to hear and monitor radio comms?
Yes, you might be coming to the part of my statement where I received communications when we got to the 12th floor.
Yeah, and my question is, as you were going up to the 12th floor...
You kind of switch off a little bit because you're trying to communicate with your breathing apparatus partner, you're trying to work out where you're going, you're confirming what you're going to do when you get there. So you need to, because there's a lot of radio traffic, and I can't tell you if I did or did not hear any, but I kind of switched my mind off from listening to radios.
Okay. As you entered the 12th floor lobby, can you describe the conditions you encountered?
Yeah, I don't believe it was majorly hot, but this could be because I've come up the stairs and I'm expecting to be hot, or the fire gear I'm wearing. It was smoky and visibility was low.
Stopping there, are you able to give us an idea of how low visibility is? How far in front of you?
This is what I'm trying to go to now. But my recollection is that the visibility inside the 12th floor lobby was better than that on the staircase. So I would say I'm talking maybe 1.5 meters.
And in the lobby itself, were you able to see where the smoke was coming from?
No.
As you crossed from the stairwell to the lobby, did you keep the stairwell lobby door open or closed?
Closed. We had no firefighting media, as I said. We didn't have what we needed available to set into the riser and bring into the lobby area. So that made that task of protecting the lobby easier because we had nothing to hold the door open.
Turning to page 5 and the second paragraph on that page, you describe how you and another 2-person crew you met searched the lobby area of the 12th floor. It's right that you followed the right-hand wall and the other crew followed the left-hand wall. Is that right?
Correct.
One question which has been asked is if both crews were keeping to the outer edges of the lobby, how are you able to search the middle of the lobby area?
Okay. This is a time where I'd like to get you and we'll do a demonstration. But so one crew member would hold the right-hand wall as a point of reference. In situations like that, the darker it is, the more disorientated you can become. So if you lose the wall, that's kind of your lifeline. So one firefighter will hold the right-hand wall and the other firefighter will then search off that firefighter. So as you're completing safe movement, you can go around 3 metres in personal contact out into the middle of the lobby area. And in a lobby like that, by the time you've come all the way around, you'd hope to have searched 100% of the floor area.
Understood. Could I ask you to turn over the page to page 6 of your statement, and the top paragraph, and in particular the top 3 lines, which say this: a short while after both crews had entered the lobby area and split up, I received a message on my radio to say that the firefighter had been found. We were no longer tasked with the firefighter emergency, and our brief had now changed to search and rescue on the 12th floor. First of all, can you remember what channel your radio was set to?
No. What I can say is my colleague, firefighter Green, can't recall receiving that message. So I'm under the assumption, and it is an assumption, that my fireground radio is still on channel 1, and I think that may be why I received the message.
Okay. How clear was the message in terms of its audibility when it came through?
Certainly clear enough to be absolutely sure that Firefighter Hill had been accounted for.
Were you given the impression that they'd been trying to get through to you but without success previously?
No.
Are you able to assist us on what your previous experience has been of the reliability of radio comms within high-rise concrete buildings?
I'm going to say the reliability of our comms isn't excellent. I've got no real experience or examples that I can give you of high-rise concrete buildings, but what I can say is there's ongoing issues with communications.
And what would you, from your perspective, what are the principal issues that you have with the reliability of the radio comms?
So the Barry set, and a Barry set is the one that's integrated into your breathing apparatus set, which is an earpiece and a bone microphone. That regularly fails, whether it's not connected or at some stages, if there's a lot of radio traffic, it will start just making a loud, continuous noise.
And that's irrespective of whether it's low, medium or high rise, the building which you're fighting the fire?
That's correct, yeah. And the handheld radios, I was at an incident recently which was a very minor incident. It was just a flooding in a block of flats, and I believe I was on the 8th floor, and I couldn't communicate with my driver who was outside the appliance. And that would be the best example that suits Grenfell Tower, was I couldn't get communications there.
When you can't get communications, whether it's with your driver or with the bridgehead, how do you cope with that? How do you respond to it? Are you able, actually, apologies, in those circumstances, are you able to find a workaround that allows you to communicate with the bridgehead or your driver?
Depends on the seriousness and the dynamics of the incident. Like going back to that particular occasion, I resorted to using my own personal mobile phone, which I shouldn't be carrying on me, but it needs must at some times. The other possibility is to have a runner. So you're taking a firefighter, it takes a longer period of time, and you're using up a vital resource to run up and down to relay messages.
Did you have reason to use your own personal mobile phone on the night of the 14th of June?
Answer no.
Did you see anyone else using their personal mobile phones?
I saw a lot of people with phones. I believe there was firefighters outside on phones of members of the public. I couldn't tell you whether they were their own personal phones or not.
And did you see any firefighters within the tower itself using their phones to try and get through to people either in the bridgehead or outside?
Answer no.
Okay. Again, staying within this top paragraph on page 6, 8 lines down, you say the 12th floor at this stage wasn't fully compromised by smoke, it was fairly protected. At this stage, what were conditions like in the lobby?
So on the 12th floor lobby, pardon, I lost my train of thought there.
Apologies. You're on the 12th floor. You were describing here that the 12th floor at that stage wasn't fully compromised by smoke. It was fairly protected. so that we can understand what you encountered, can you just give us a detailed idea of the conditions that you encountered on the 12th
So
floor
again,
lobby?
it is black smoke, and that's the statement probably reads a massive underestimation of the conditions. That my statement there, in the way it's been translated, is suggesting that it was okay. It was far from okay.
And dealing first of all with...
Well, sorry, had you finished?
No, it was. I was just going to say it's black smoke, and we're looking at about a metre.
Can you give us, assist us with the nature and intensity of the heat you encountered on the 12th floor?
As I said, the heat, I have got no recollection or memory of it being over hot at that stage. I had another breathing apparatus wear later in the evening on the 6th floor, and that was physically unbearable heat-wise. It was nowhere near that on the 12th floor at that time.
In your statement, when you describe the fact, when you say that the lobby was fairly protected, what do you mean by that?
What I meant was, as I said earlier, the conditions, in my recollection, is the conditions on the 12th floor lobby were slightly better than the conditions of the stairs.
I suppose what I'm getting at is, what do you mean by, what are you intending to convey by use of the word protected there?
Okay.
What was protected?
Okay, so whether it's all the flat doors at that stage were closed, so there was no fire coming externally into the lobby, that would probably be what I meant by protected at that stage.
Thank you. Again, still on page 6, that top paragraph, 11 lines down, it starts, we got to the first flat on our right. I think it was flat 6. It was 100% alight. Unfortunately, because we had opened the door, it compromised the visibility in the lobby area, and the visibility dropped, so we closed the door straight away. It may be useful, Mr. Aston-O'Donovan, if we look at MAD3, Paul, if that could be drawn up onto the screens. And is the flat 6 you're referring to in your statement that numbered 6 on the plan?
Yeah. So the police officer that interviewed me provided me with this, and for ease of description, he labelled these flat numbers. They're not the flat numbers of the 12th floor. They're just for me to be able to describe it. But yes, flat 6 is where we believe there was a fire inside that flat.
And the door that you were referring to in that quotation from your statement, just to get things clear, that's the door from the stairwell to the lobby, is that right?
Sorry, the door that we opened?
Yeah, you said we got to the first flat on our right. I think it was flat 6. It was 100% alight. Unfortunately, because we'd opened the door, it compromised the visibility in the lobby area.
So
was that the flat door?
The
or
flat door.
Thank you. You said you were describing conditions on the 12th floor lobby, visibility of 1 metre. You say visibility dropped. Can you give us an idea as to how far visibility dropped as a result of the door opening?
We're going there now, yeah. Hand in front of your face.
It would be useful if you could just talk us through...
You couldn't see any further than your hand in front of your face?
Correct, sir, yeah.
It would be useful, Mr. Aston-O'Donovan, if you could take us step by step through the process by which you gained entry to the flat, just so that we have an idea of the steps you take.
Okay, I think it's important to clear up what happened outside and the cancel of firefighter emergency. So when we got to the 12th floor lobby, there was a firefighter's helmet on the floor, which suggested that there was a firefighter in trouble because the helmet's outside there. It was shortly then after that I received comms to say no firefighter emergency. We weren't given another brief. This was something, we're now on the 12th floor, so we've come up with a brief ourselves that we're going to search and rescue and see what we can clear from the 12th floor. At that stage, I gathered the other crew together, who I'm completely unaware of who they are, but I said, you stick to the left-hand wall, we'll go right-hand wall, search and rescue, and then we'll go from there. So myself and my colleague, Firefighter Green, have entered the 12th floor lobby. On the right-hand wall, he had a thermal imaging camera. We had no firefighting media. We've carried on along the left-hand wall, searching the lobby area as we're going in the method that I described earlier. The first door we've come to is flat 6. So at flat 6, we're following procedures and checking if the door handle's hot, and it is. We've opened the door at that stage, and Crew Manager Green has looked in with the thermal imaging camera and said that that's well alight. the lobby area at this stage was taking a lot of smoke and a lot of heat, and the conditions became a lot worse. So we closed the door and we moved on to the next flat.
And in the same paragraph, you say we decided that if anyone was still in there, they weren't our priority.
Right. This is a translation thing as well.
Obviously, would you be able to?
Everyone is priority. So at that stage, we're making a decision that I've got no firefighting media, and there's not a lot that we can do to go inside a flat that's under them conditions. There's other doors there. Let's try them. If there's nobody there, then we'll come back to that flat and do what we can do in that flat to make sure that there's nobody there. But without any firefighting media, you're... I'm trying to find a phrase which is something I can say in a room like this, but you're not able to achieve much.
Thank you. I interrupted you. Apologies. You went on to the next flat,
Okay.
which is flat 5, I think.
That's correct.
Yeah. And again, can you describe the process you undertook going as you went to flat 5?
No problem. So we've closed the door and we made a decision to go on to the next flat, and the door to this flat is locked. So your mind's going and you're trying to think of why is it locked. The most likely scenario is somebody's self-evacuated, locked it and gone, but that you can't assume that at any stage. It could be that they've locked the door from the inside and they've decided they're staying there, or they've locked the door before bed and gone to bed. So we made the decision that we need to gain entry into that flat. We had no forcible entry equipment with us, so it's just your size 9 boots at that stage. So we started trying to boot the door in.
Other witnesses have talked about shouting, banging on doors, kicking on doors. Were you and the other crew doing that as you went round the 12th floor lobby? Again, apologies if this is an obvious question. What were you shouting?
Is anybody there? Is anybody in this flat? Also trying to communicate with the other crew. Have you got anything over there? And my last communication with the other crew on the left hand was when we detailed our brief. I didn't speak to them or debrief. I still don't know who they are, to be honest.
Now, as I understand it, you were, as you put it, using your size 9s. How far did you go in, basically kicking the door in a flat 5? How far did you get?
I'm going to estimate that we had, between us, we had 5 or 6 goes at the door. And at that stage, 2 ladies came out of the next flat, which is flat 4.
Okay. And apologies, you'd had 5 or 6 goes at trying to break in the door of flat 5. How successful were you at pushing that door through so you could gain entry?
Very unsuccessful.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned that 2 women came out of flat 4, and if I could ask you to turn to page 6 of your statement, and the second paragraph you say, I think the second line onwards, I told them both to go back into their flat, into the bathroom just inside their door on the left, as it wasn't compromised, and there wasn't a lot of smoke in there. I went into their flat while my colleague stood by the front door. Now, Paul, could I ask you to turn up MAD 3 again? And Mr. Aston-O'Donovan, if you could help us just indicate on the screen that's by you, the larger one, where you were when you told the women to go back into their flat.
Right.
If you use the larger one.
I'm okay to point, yeah. So at this stage, we're trying to get this door open. The ladies have indicated that they need help from here, so I've walked into the flat with them. It doesn't translate very well on the statement. Obviously, I wouldn't have known there's a bathroom inside their door, so I've walked in with them. As I've got inside their flat door, I've seen the bathroom and I said, let's go in here.
So just for the sake of the transcript, we're looking at the top left-hand corner, which is marked flat 5. You were trying to break in the door of that flat, and then slightly further to the left, the 2 women were standing in the corridor.
Yeah. So they're taking some smoke in at that stage. So.
And had they anything covering their faces?
They had headscarves or towels or something, I'm not entirely sure.
And how far into flat 4 did you go with them?
Literally, I've looked down the corridor and I've seen the smoke coming into their flat. They're telling me that their flat's on fire. So in the door in the bathroom, no more than a couple of metres.
You say you could see the smoke coming into their flat. Could you see where the smoke was coming into?
I can't, unfortunately.
And you said that they told you that the flat was on fire. Did you see anything on fire?
The only evidence is verbal from the two ladies.
Just to sort of clarify this, looking at page 6, the second paragraph, the first line, it says the fire by now was spreading inside their flat. Is that right or not?
The only evidence I've got of that is what the ladies were telling me.
Okay. At the bottom of page 6 and the top of page 7 of your statement, you described the briefing you gave to the two women. Doing the best you can, are you able to give us an idea of the precise words or the gist of the words you used in explaining the route you were going to take out?
I can pretty much remember that word for word, yeah. So I spoke to the ladies. They were obviously distressed and panicked. Between crew manager Green and I, it was very apparent that we had to get them out. There was no way we were leaving them there on a stay-put basis, so to speak. So at that stage, I've said to them, this is what we're going to do. It's going to take about 90 seconds to get through this smoke. I said, we're going to leave your flat. What I don't want you to do is take your normal route to the lobby stairs because you'll get lost. I need you to hold my arm. We're going to leave the flat and we're going to follow the left-hand wall. We're going to go past the first door, past the second door, past the bin cupboard and out into the stairs. Then we're going to carry on going downstairs, and when you get to the 5th floor, we should be able to breathe.
And how do you ascertain that the two women have understood that? How do you double-check that?
Confirmed and asked them to tell me exactly what we're doing.
And at that stage, did the two women have anything protecting their face and mouth?
Yeah, they had scarves and we've instructed them to hold them over their mouth and that way.
Did you radio down to the Bridgehead who you'd located, where you'd located them, and you were coming down?
Yeah, both my colleague and I both tried comms from the 12th floor unsuccessfully.
Okay. As you went down, can you describe the smoke conditions as you went down from the 12th to the 5th floor?
It was pretty much the same as when we came up at that stage, and breathable from just below the 5th.
As you were coming down from the 12th to the 5th floor, did you or Mr. Green try and radio through to the Bridgehead again to update them?
No, once we were moving with the ladies, there was no attempt at communications.
As you went down, can you remember now whether the stairwell was lit or not?
No, I have memories of lighting. I don't know if it's emergency lighting. I couldn't tell you where and when. My memory is it wasn't pitch black. You could see little spots of light, but the smoke makes it pitch black anyway. So.
Okay. And can you remember as you went down whether the doors between the stairwells and the lobbies were open or closed?
Oh, no, I'm rushing a lady who's holding her breath down the stairs. I'm not looking at lobby doors.
Can you remember, again, maybe a question you can't able to assist us on with an answer, but can you remember the nature and density of the traffic going up and coming down as you were going down?
I know I certainly had a clear run.
Okay. Just so to be clear, was it on the 5th floor that you handed the woman you were escorting down to colleagues?
Slightly lower.
Slightly lower.
I believe it might have been around the Bridgehead area or maybe a little bit below the Bridgehead.
Can you remember whether the colleagues you encountered when you handed over the woman had been specifically tasked to assist taking casualties down to the Bridgehead and out of the tower?
I've got no evidence that was exactly their task, but there seemed to be a system of, let's call them casualty runners, that breathing apparatus crew were taking them from a respirable level of the tower to the base of the tower and then maybe handing them over or carrying on to a triage area.
After you handed over the woman to colleagues to be taken out, did you try and radio through to the Bridgehead what you'd done and the state of play in terms of the FSG you were seeking to carry out?
I reported back to the Bridgehead following.
And can you remember now what you said to the Bridgehead?
Yes, so there was an incident where my partner and I got split up. We regrouped fairly quickly around the 4th or 5th floor. My statement says it was higher than that, but I'm assured that it's not, and that must be true because I wouldn't have seen him. So we regrouped and we went to the Bridgehead together. And because I wasn't given a fire survival guidance brief by anyone, I knew it was important to get as much information across as to where these ladies came from. During my conversation with them, I said, what flat is this? What flat are we in? The information I got was flat 84. I've since found out that that's incorrect. I believe it's 94 now. So the information that I gave back to the Bridgehead is we've taken 2 adult females from flat 84 on the 12th floor, and I detailed exactly where that was. I said we've entered, it's the 3rd door on a right-hand wall search.
Were you able to update the Bridgehead on the full extent of the search you've been able to carry out on the 12th floor?
No. Obviously, I explained that my initial brief was firefighter emergency. This is what then we decided to do. So I didn't. I don't think I said it, but I think they would have assumed that the lobby area was clear.
In your professional experience, how practical would it have been for you or Mr. Green to have carried a second BA set to assist bringing down casualties should they need air?
Possible. This is a hindsight thing, obviously, and nobody's been in that situation before. If I was to do it again tomorrow, I'd take a breathing apparatus set with me.
How practical would it to have been to attach, say, for example, a spare mask to your own BA set?
That would be the way to go. We have as long as you've got enough air in your cylinder, of which on this occasion I did have. So if I had a mask with a demand valve, I've got an auxiliary port on my breathing apparatus set that I could have worked out of.
Thank you very much.
Can I just,
sorry.
Are you comfortable giving evidence still? You don't need a break particularly?
No, sir, I'm fine.
All right, well then we're probably better to keep going, but if you get to the point when you do think you need a break, just let me know.
Thank you, sir.
Could I now ask you about the resting period after you'd completed your first task? And if I could ask you to turn to page 8 of your statement, the 3rd paragraph. And you describe here resting after your first rescue task, and you're resting outside the tower. Now, midway down that paragraph, you say there was a bit of a mix-up. Here, as there were 2 queues of firefighters with BA and holding zones outside. One was for the north side of the tower by the A40, and the other queue was for the firefighters who had previously been into the tower already. The marshalling officer in charge then called for 10 officers with BA, and for an unknown reason we were taken past the queue of waiting firefighters in the holding area into the tower. Looking at each element of that, can you remember who the marshalling officer was?
I don't know. It was a watch manager.
Male or female?
Male. I believe he had a Scottish accent.
Okay. Was that watch manager the marshalling officer for both queues or just one?
Just the queue which was forming around the main entrance to the tower, underneath the mezzanine level that goes above the walkway.
So is the queue for those who hadn't already gone into the tower, is that right?
Not necessarily. The queue from either people going in for their first wear from that side, or people like myself and Firefighter Green who were going in for our second wear.
Okay. Now, was that marshalling officer supported by any other men or women assisting him discharge his role?
My memory is there was a lot of radio contact between him and Bridgehead. I can't remember anybody physically near him, just communication over the radio.
Now, you're quite clear in your statement as to the purpose of the 2 queues. Was the clarity of purpose of those 2 queues clear at the time?
So I don't really understand that one.
Sorry, you say in your statement here there were 2 queues of firefighters, one on the northern side and the other queue is for firefighters who'd previously been into the tower.
Right, no, so, okay. If it says that, then that's a misinterpretation again. There's no separate queue for people who've worn once and people who haven't worn at all. There seem to be 2 breathing apparatus marshalling areas. By a marshalling area, I mean an area where people are gathering in breathing apparatus ready to be brought into the tower to the Bridgehead to be tasked with a role. Does that make sense?
It does. Flowing on from that, just to give you context, in that same paragraph at the end, I think 3 lines from the end of that paragraph, you say there's a confusion on the radio between the 2 marshalling areas.
Right, that's again a translation. The confusion is my own faults.
I understand.
Yeah, there was no confusion or any conflict on the radio. I found it. So we were gathered. I don't know if you've got an overview of the tower, and I can explain where the 2 marshalling areas are. I don't know if that's important, but
it may be something. We'll probably take a break, and it may be useful. We'll try and get a plan that sort of more easily assists you explain that.
Right. But basically, I found it confusing that we were brought up the alleyway next to the railway, past, I'm talking maybe 30 or 40 firefighters waiting in breathing apparatus, and then straight into the tower.
I see.
Does that make it clearer?
It does,
Yeah.
thank you. Now, what we'll do, we'll try and find a sort of clearer depiction of the tower so we can come back to this in due course after the break. But now, can I ask about when you returned to the Bridgehead?
Yes.
Now, when you went back into the tower, the Bridgehead, as I understand it, was then on the ground floor. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe the Bridgehead was actually being moved to the ground floor towards the end of my first wear. It was in that process that it was
And what information were you given, if any, about the deterioration in conditions which had necessitated the need to change the Bridgehead, the location of the Bridgehead?
Just that the 3rd floor had been compromised and they had to move lower.
Could I ask you to turn to page 8 of your statement and the last paragraph, 2nd line? You say there that you were held at the Bridgehead for 90 minutes before being given another task. Were you given an explanation for the delay at the time?
No, but it's quite obvious. There's a lot of wares that have been committed to the building. There's limited resources, limited water supply. So I expect, and this is a guess, that people coordinating the Bridgehead and the firefighting actions within the building are making best use of the resources that they've got available.
And what briefing were you given regarding your next task?
Floor 6, no search and rescue, all people accounted for on that floor. It was purely an extinguishing the fire brief. I was told that there was 2 branches and 2 lines of hose available to us from the riser outside the 6th floor lobby door, and we were to go up there as a crew of 5 and extinguish the fire on the 6th floor.
Who gave you the briefing? Can you remember now?
I can't.
A male or female officer?
I believe it was male. I know crew manager Jason Hunter was running one of the boards, but I don't believe it was him that gave me the briefing.
Were you given any information regarding conditions within the tower, in the stairwells, for example, or particular lobbies?
No, but they were aware that it was my second wear, so they knew I'd have an idea of what the conditions were.
So can we take from that you were given no specific idea of the conditions on the lobby of floor 6, is that right? Save for that you were directed to extinguish fire?
Yeah, no specific details, but obviously we know it's on fire because that was my brief.
Could I ask you to turn to the top paragraph of page 9? And you say there was a bit of confusion about the equipment that we were told would be available to us. So once we reached the floor we were tasked with, there wasn't a lot of equipment available for us to use. Is the confusion the content of the briefing or its accuracy as to what equipment was waiting for you once you got to the 6th floor?
No confusion with the accuracy of the briefing. The confusion was that we only had 1 line of hose and branch available and not 2.
Thank you. If I could ask Paul to turn up the telemetry sheet at this point, and hopefully box 229. Again, SDBA, your name identified there. Interestingly, you're not identified as a second wear, as, say, Mr. Tillotson is immediately above you. Do you know why that would be?
No.
Thank you. And again, just for the sake of completeness, if we read to the left, you'll see in the green column tally out at 6:18, and then going on to the far right extreme, 6:46. Again,
Sounds reasonable.
thank you.
Yeah, it was certainly daylight when we came out from the second wear.
As you went up to the 6th floor from the bridgehead on the ground floor, can you describe the smoke conditions for us as you ascended the tower?
I can't remember, but I expect I can't remember because it wasn't as black as the first wear. I'm going to guess, and it is only a guess, that the visibility was a lot more at that stage.
And can you describe heat as you went up?
Hotter, certainly a lot hotter than the first time.
And again, can you give us an idea as to how much the radio comms you were able to hear as you went up the tower?
No comms. I believe my breathing apparatus partner, firefighter Green, it was on the second wear that he had the audible noise, which I described earlier in the Barry set, and detached that from his ear to be able to concentrate.
As you went up, do you remember whether the doors leading from the stairwell to the lobbies were open or closed?
Sorry.
Do you remember what firefighting kit was in the staircase, if any?
Again, a certain amount of littered hose. I can't remember any charged lengths of hose running actually on the stairwell itself, up the stairs itself.
When you reached the 6th floor lobby, what firefighting kit did you find?
So we had, I believe it was already made up, and I think it might have been charged as well. One liner hose and one branch. There was spare hose rolled up, but no branch.
Looking at page 9 of your statement, the second paragraph, you described the 6th floor lobby as hot and unbearable. Are you able to help us? Had fire actually penetrated the 6th floor lobby by that stage?
No, there was no fire in the lobby, it was in the flats.
As you did last time, it would be very helpful if you could describe for us step by step the process you adopted or directed to be adopted the firefighters should adopt when going onto the 6th floor lobby and into the flats.
Okay, so on that particular occasion, we had formulated a plan between us. You don't normally work in an odd number crew in a task like this. A crew of 4 would have been more common, but we had 5 for the makeup of the people who were waiting in the lobby at that stage. So we made a decision that with the 2 lines of hose and branches that we were told was going to be available for us, one crew of 2 was going to go by the left-hand wall, make access to a flat, extinguish the fire, carry on to the next flat on the left-hand wall, carry on to the next flat, while the other crew of 2 with the other line of hose and branch, which didn't actually exist, was going to take the right-hand wall and do the same thing. So systematically work through the flats, putting out the fire until we meet in the middle, all fire on that floor's out, and then we can go. The spare person would coordinate what was happening.
I'm great. Taking that step by step, if we can look at page 9 of your statement and the final paragraph, you say the water pressure wasn't very good. We were connected to a dry riser main and we were using a bigger branch hose, and it was the larger of the 2 options that we were using and not usually used in a compartment fire. Now, are you able to give us a rough idea, whether in terms of bar or otherwise, of the water pressure you encountered compared to, say, 10 bar?
Yeah, so if normally we try and operate around 7 bar, this was no more than 2.
You mentioned in that quotation that there were 2 options available to you.
Oh, right, so this is where I'm describing the equipment that we have on a fire appliance. So the default branch that we would go to is one that's called an RB101, and that's a manoeuvrable branch with certain amounts of settings. We have a default setting on there of 230 litres per minute that is set to. The branch that we had on this day, I'm testing my technical knowledge here again now, I believe it's a Project 2 branch, which is which is a bigger branch, which is more water capacity that comes through it. So that's going to minimise, if there's a problem with the water pressure, it's going to use more water and take some of the pressure available away from you.
Okay. And again, for the sake of completeness, and it may be an obvious question, why did you go for that option?
That was
All you had?
all that was available, yeah.
Going back to page 9 and the first paragraph there, you describe extinguishing the fire in flat 1. And it may be useful at this stage if we could turn up, Paul, MAD 3. And does the flat numbered 1, is that the flat you're referring to where the fire was extinguished?
Correct.
And just for the avoidance of doubt, is it right that you extinguished a fire using the available water you had,
Correct.
the available pressure?
Yeah, not me personally. I was kind of coordinating from the inside the lobby area. It was firefighter Green, and I believe it's crew manager Tillotson from Paddington who was in our crew.
You say your crew was about to fight the fire in flat 2, but you noticed your air levels had diminished and you decided to withdraw. Can you remember now at what levels your air had reached by that stage?
I can't, because it wasn't my own set. I had plenty of air left. It was a member of the crew, and policy dictates that when one member of the crew gets low on air, we all exit together as a team. And
just so that members of the public who are listening to the evidence, what's the underlying reason for that policy? Do you know? Why is it the way it is?
Seems like an obvious question. It's so you're not sucking on a face mask with no air, basically.
As you went down back...
Well, was that the question you wanted
No,
answered?
I was coming... I was coming to think of another way, in a millet way, think of another way around it.
Well, how about, I mean, I think really what Mr. Kinnear would like to know is, for the benefit of all of us perhaps, is why is it policy that you go back as a unit?
It's just you never split up. So it seems like if you're in a crew of 5, and certainly on that night, in hindsight, it's something that if I was to do it again tomorrow, we'd split the crew and work out who had enough air to stay together, but with no life risk and with plenty of breathing apparatus wearers ready to go. As I told you before, we were waiting 90 minutes to get there. The most feasible and correct option was, let's all go together, let's let a crew with enough air to get the next flat done can go and do that. Have I cleared that? I feel like
That's very useful, thank you.
I feel like I'm going around the place.
When you returned to the Bridgehead, is it right that you briefed Mr. Welsh as to what had gone on and what you'd encountered?
Yeah, I read that in my statement when I was. I can't remember if it was Richard Welsh at that stage, but we certainly reported back to the Bridgehead with our exact actions of what happened on floor 6.
Thank you. Could I ask you to turn to page 11 of your statement and the second paragraph, second line? You state there that most of the equipment was piled up outside doors of the stairs, so it was like an equipment dump for our own use, so we knew what we have to take onto each floor following, I think, our briefings. Did this placing of equipment, did this present an obstacle to people as they came up and down the stairwells or tried to get in and out of the lobbies?
My recollection, I can't remember it ever hindering my own movement around the stairwell. My recollection of it is there's rolled lengths of hose or equipment and it's stacked close to the wall. As you're coming up the stairs, you have a wall in front of you, so it's up against that wall to leave the area clear and the lobby door clear as well.
Thank you. Now, I think earlier on we were talking about the queue or queues
Right.
outside the tower, and you asked whether it was possible to have a plan or a photograph that showed an overview of the tower. I think we have one. It's at MET 000-16854. And apologies, we just
No
wait
problem.
whilst it...
Yeah, no problem.
And if we could amplify the tower.
Okay.
Now, it'd probably be most useful, Mr. Aston-O'Donovan, if you could identify for us where pinpointing it on the screens above us, where the queue or queues were, first of all.
This is just what I can think. I believe the marshalling zone for both of my wares was underneath this here.
So in the southeast, to the southeast of the tower.
Correct. That's where we were for both of ours. The rest area, BA main controls up in this area here.
So northeast?
Yeah, that's where we were changing our cylinders and retesting our sets.
Yeah.
And waiting before you get called to a marshalling area or before you decide to go to a marshalling area. I was then taken on the second wear underneath because obviously there was a risk element of things falling from the building. Everyone here, is that all right? Yeah. Of everything falling from the building. So we were taken underneath and all the way around here, and we ended up coming out up this. Is this a playground here? Does anybody know? I believe this here is a playground.
Yep.
And we were brought here, and in this area here, there seems to be a lot of firefighters, which is what I'm calling the second marshalling area. So I believe they were here.
And you seem to indicate in your earlier evidence you had some reservations about the efficiency of that setup. Is that a fair summary of what you were saying?
I can only imagine that this is just an assumption that I've got, which is wrong, because I can only imagine that those two marshalling areas were communicating, but I don't know why we were taken past them. The reason I know this is there's a colleague of mine who works out of Golf 29 Park Royal who was frustrated that on my second wear I was jumping the queue, so to speak, because he was ready, he'd been waiting and he wanted to go in. So he was in the red squared area, we were taken past that, and the police helped us enter the building through a side entrance, and it seemed to me like I was jumping the queue, which obviously I didn't want to do ahead of anyone else, but that's why it kind of stuck in my head that there may be confusion between the two marshalling areas.
And when the marshalling officer called for 10 officers, I think you say in your statement, did you volunteer to him or to someone else that you'd already been in the tower under BA?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Aston-O'Donovan, those are all the questions I've got, so it might be appropriate to have a brief 10-minute break to see whether there are any other outstanding matters to allow us to conclude, hopefully, before 1.
Yes, well, this does happen from time to time. Council needs to take stock and other people may have suggestions. So we'll have a break now. If I said we'll sit again at 10 to 1, would that be long enough?
I think so.
Well, if not, you can send a message. Right, we'll break until 10 to 1 or whenever we're told that council are ready.
Thank you, sir.
So we'd like to go with the usher, and I have to ask you not to talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room.
I've heard you repeat that many times.
Well, there we are then. Good, thank you. Right, I'll rise and sit. I'll sit again at 10 to 1.
Thanks, sir.
But if that doesn't give you enough time, send a message by the usher. We'll see where we go.
I'll do so. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.